It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, June 28th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. I set out to have a focus to just cover what's going on with Ron today. And unfortunately, for time, a lot more was added to the show. So it's probably going to be longer than I expected. But the reason I was going to try to do that is because I think it was important to try to just get people recentered with whatever's going on with that conversation. And I know the people that follow this show, and watch kind of are as attuned to it as we are, you probably know. But for a lot of people that just kind of see it passing, it is very confusing. The conversation, people I talk to outside of our circles seem to be, almost pegged to something from weeks ago about what's going on with Iran. I found it very interesting. But there's a lot that I wanted to bring into the conversation today. As we get started, I apologize for the delay, for the timing, for those that are tuning in live. And you might notice a few weird things with the website right now, with the article, the link we posted for the show today. That, not to get into it all because I don't want to waste time, but there's always something going on these days. We're dealing with this in the background right now. The site's been up and down all day. Last I checked, the guy, my guys didn't even know what's going. Hasn't told me what's going on anyway. He might know, but he's been trying to fix it. He ultimately got it back up to where it was up, but it's been intermittently up and down. So I apologize for that, and that's why the delay was today. And also with the link, you'll notice there's some discrepancies. If you're a regular on the show, it'll look a little bit different because I had to try to publish it quickly before it would go down again. So at least we got the link out. And so if it's down, that is the link that will be with the source material once the site comes back up. If not, it'll be on Substack when I'm done today. But just be aware of that. It's just this never-ending cycle for those of us in this field that are, in my opinion, doing objective, nonpartisan work that just get relentlessly, it's for everything. It's like, from my experience, it's not one thing or the other. It seems to be like an all of, this platform, that platform, this platform. Like locals right now, as far as I can tell, is barely working for me. It was kept going down. That could be for everybody, but who's to say? But I just noticed a lot of this stuff. And whether it's focused or not, I do think there's a lot changing with social media, just technology, that we're seeing a lot of things transition, and we're going to see some of these kind of blips in between it all. So be aware of that. But what I want to start with today, or really what I want to get into today first, is I'll focus on some of the parts I've been highlighting around the transition, that I'm just getting from a nonpartisan perspective, some of the things, like, for example, Tim Dillon on Joe Rogan's show and some of the things they're saying. I just want to reiterate what I think this is showing us. But I know, even within this community, there's a lot of disagreement on where this is or who sees through what. And I wanted to make a point about that to start. Now, the way I titled the show today, it's one of the main things that I want to get into, but there's a hell of a lot more we'll talk about today. But I do think that it's sort of an overarching point for where this comes back to. And that's why I titled it just that today. And it's very alarming where this goes. They've always had a similar biometric program for the US government. But what we're seeing is this sort of next generation multimodal, all-encompassing automatic kind of biometric system that's framed as the U.S. Army, but is already being utilized by ICE. And I want to go through why that's incredibly alarming for what we all already been discussing, the overlap with FLOC and artificial intelligence, but to use that as sort of an overarching point from a lot of what we talk about today. And that has to do with the Israel infiltration of this government, which everyone everywhere seems to see. We'll get into that. And how that connects with some of the other parts of the foreign policy conversation and just some of the other kind of deviations from the conversation today. Now, one thing I wanted to show you. Derek recently did a post about his Substack and support. What we talked about this, and he got a very strong kind of show of support on Substack. Now, we do a lot of that on this platform. We've done, fundraisers here and there, different promotional things, regularly just letting people know that we need support because this platform runs entirely on user engagement. I'm trying to avoid the word donations because that's something they're trying to use against us right now. But, so we put out this product of what our show is, and you guys decide what's worth to you. So you pay whatever you think it's worth. It's kind of the idea that makes the most sense to avoid the suppression they use around the donation dynamic. But we don't have any like I think the largest donation that we get right now in even like a somewhat maybe a couple times a year level is like $1,000. And I mean, I'm that's it, and not to diminish any of that. It's amazing the kind of people out there that support us from $1 to 1,000. What I'm trying to show you is that we don't have some large financial mechanism. We don't have some huge secret backer that you don't know. It's all of you. Easily verifiable. That's what and in fact, because of the suppression and censorship, we've been shoved in that direction, but it's a blessing in disguise because we're not bound by all the other, levers that can be used to shut people down who are kind of, at least to some degree or another, hinging on the mainstream system. But I just wanted to stress that because we don't exist without the individual support out there. But at the same time, the reason TLAV has the level of success that it does is because of you. So it's not to say that we're, we're always going through some part of a struggle because of this, the amount of support that we get and what we want to build to, it's incongruent. And so over the years, as you've seen, I've tried to slightly pull back on some of the stuff we wanted to do, and unjustifiably, I would say, because of the amount of support and the amount of reach and the quality of work. It's obviously there's a disconnect there. But the point I'm getting at is that all of you out there that do support us are why we exist. And that's a success in my mind. But what I'm going back to is Derek's point about Substack. Is he put this post out and said, look, this is the work we do. And you may not know, because we do have a lot of new people in this field. A lot of you that have been here forever, you know all this. But some of the new people over the last so many years that may not even be aware that we need them to be engaged with this platform financially. Otherwise, it will go away. But the point being is that he put this post out and showed people that on Substack and got this huge show of support on Substack from people that said, I didn't even know you needed. I didn't even know you were looking for donations. And so I just wanted to use that as kind of a springboard point to show this to people. This is our Substack from June 29th. In fact, hold on, make sure I got the right image on there. It still serves for the same point. I should have gone back even further, but the simple point is you can see our Substack subscribers, or rather this would be the revenue. This is our subscribers, but the revenue has been kind of consistently going down on Substack, and it's somewhat consistent everywhere else. And it's very confounding to me because this is the subscriber line. So we're getting an increasingly growing amount of subscribers, and ebbs and flows, but generally an ongoing upward incline. And yet this is the other side. This is the money side of it. And I just think that's incredible. That doesn't seem like that makes any sense at all. Like you may get an ebb and a flow. Not everybody who wants to subscribe is going to have influence and money, whatever else. The point is that I think there's more of an algorithmic thing happening here. And I want to both show that because I just find it interesting, but also use that as a point to say, if you're out there and you support us on Substack or anywhere else, just know that we will not exist in the future if we don't have enough people continually supporting us. And those that continue to do it, whether for $1 or anything else, you're already doing what you need to. And you're amazing, and you're the reason this platform exists. But for those that are engaging with this content and you find it valuable, and you see what we do and you find it interesting and valuable and use it regularly, well, ask yourself whether that's worth showing us what it's worth to you to avoid the original part we talked about. And, and if you don't think so, then I'm okay with that. Still enjoy the content, still share it, use it as much as you like. But if you wanted to see it continue, this is what I would like to see for the other side of that. And if we do go that direction even more so, and we'll try to do this regardless, but grow, get more writers, expand further in every other possible way we can. But I wanted to start with that because I do think it's interesting how some people just don't know that that's how this platform operates. In fact, almost as a nod to how the quality of the work we do and the community that we have, people don't even look at it like it is a donation model thing. They think it's something, assume we have some kind of financial backing. We do not. But again, thank you to all you OG people out there that have been doing this with TLAV the longest time. I wanted to point to our Telegram channel as well, because what I've been doing more recently is using that as the main location for people to know what's going on. We were using Wire. I still post there, but I guess not everybody really uses it anymore, and I get why. But I'm going to continue to post in our Telegram channel. Like I'll be live in an hour, or this show won't be happening today, or, giving you the updates, because the way we do this show, it's not always the same time. It can be, I'm just a regular guy and I've got a life. And so things kind of fluctuate like all of us. And so if you want to know moment to moment where we're at, what's going on, engage with the community, here you go. Now, on that note, I'll actually point out that we just set up another Telegram channel for what Derek's event will be in Nashville, or technically Franklin. I take it back. It'll be his activation tour happening. And actually, let me grab that really quickly. It'll be his activation tour that is coming on July 24th It says Nashville, but it's technically Franklin, but it's for people that don't know Franklin. It's greater Nashville area, but it's Franklin. The area is the town, and it's going to be at Deanne's Gallery. I'll be hosting. It's going to be an amazing event. We want as many people to come out as possible. The reason I'm pointing that out is because we started a Telegram channel for a local event, but we plan to grow that into a local community thing after this event. So I'll be sharing that as well. But make sure you check this out because it'll be a good event. I'm looking forward to it. And join our Telegram channel. Now, a couple opening points I wanted to get into that I just thought was interesting that really kind of relates to the Elon Musk Twitter point we'll get to. But I just didn't even know where to fit this in. I just thought this was absolutely strange. And I've got a bunch of stuff like this I just felt like sharing today. So this is Aaron Day. He says, first on this point, I know I got into crypto so that I could have banks hold it for me. How about you? Because the post is, Cynthia Loomis says U.S. banks will now be able to offer crypto services. Well, this really depends on how you wanted this. Were you cheering when Trump said we'll make crypto basically supporting the U.S. dollar? If you were, that's okay. You can agree with making money on the back of their manipulative, corrupt dynamics or whatever you look at it as, but that's not the way it was designed. And it's not the way that this thing was built. Whether Bitcoin or anything else, the idea of this entire ecosystem was about getting away from the control of the dollar, getting away from the control of government, freedom. So it's interesting that this goes this way and it's being framed as some sort of win. That's the fake MAGA, fake libertarian, fake all of that. There's a fake kind of lens or grouping over all of the stuff that's happening today. But he says this is the inversion of crypto. He's right. Follow Aaron. He does great work. But this is what I wanted to show you. Now, this is weird. I almost don't even want to play this because I get the feeling that there's something weird to this. But if you didn't see this, there's even someone down here saying, why do you keep sharing clips that are beeping sounds instead of saying words? I think that's strange because this is a clip where she's speaking with the audio down. You can see it. She's speaking. Okay. Well, here's what it sounds like right now when you play it. And I'm not going to play it long. You hear the beeping? That's all it is. And it's very weird. There's some kind of weird intermittent beeping. It's not some kind of normal beep. I don't even know why that would be what would fill in. Now, before I even get to that, I thought that was weird. I thought, okay, maybe he posted this and didn't check the audio, whatever. I felt, I don't want to say for sure, but I thought I remember hearing the audio when I first put it aside, but I'll leave that alone. I asked the guys Grok, I said, what is what's with the beep? What is that about? Do you know anything about that? And it says, because this again, one of the ways that this is, can be an interesting, what do you know about this tweet? Was this deleted? Like that's something you can't get anywhere else, right? And so in this case, it says the clip is a short video of Senator Cynthia Loomis speaking, and you hear beeping. It says this is a common playback issue on Twitter. Which, don't you love that they still put Twitter? You got to love that Grok still puts Twitter in parentheses. Great guy. They should have just kept it that way. But it says not something in the original video itself. The video was uploaded normally with normal speech. But when playing it back, the audio tracking isn't loading correctly and gets replaced by beeps. A frequent symptom in media players when there's a mismatch or corruption on this. What? I've never seen that before. And of course, it tries to give you ways to refresh it. I can't get it. I've reloaded it. So here's my point. Is this just some kind of tactic to hide things they don't want you to see? Obviously, it could be that. If that's not even this, I guarantee it'll be used that way, my opinion. But think about how weird that is. So suddenly, and if you want to listen to it, you feel free. For all I know, some kind of weird neuroscience going on here. But oops, didn't mean to hit that. Ultimately, it's some kind of weird oscillating sound that changes speed. And so at the end of the day, it's whatever you think it is one thing. But why? Have you heard that before? Is this just some kind of weird effort to be able to, I don't know, I'll leave it there. But I just thought that was very strange. And the way that it says some kind of common thing that happens on this platform when they just can't load the audio properly. We're seeing these ID issues or tweets being I've gone over all this stuff. This platform is like designing itself in a way that is, almost through accidental like errors, like a lot of these things, it's creating a way that everything can be controlled even further than it already is, which I don't think surprises anybody, but that's all my opinion. But on that note, in a larger sense, I do think most people are starting to question just things like this more than I've ever seen in my entire life doing this. And you guys have known this. You watch my interviews if you're, regular follower of this platform. I've asked people in all angles of the conversation over the last couple of years the same kind of question. Like I asked Larkin Rose when I interviewed him as somebody from a hard, anarchist, kind of voluntarist, non-statist perspective. Somebody who's been fighting for this longer than anybody I know. and has been, frustrated by the people who just don't want to hear it. He admits that he has had made more headway with people in this kind of like the non-statist, like anarchist, no government conversation than he ever has before. We just can't ignore things like that. You can ask, anybody I ask in any part of the conversation, whether they're partisan, whether they're not, it's the same kind of answer. Ask Castronoff and Fitz the same thing. They all say, yes, I'm noticing this major change in people's awareness. And I just think that is a powerful thing. Now, I think it's happened before. And I've talked about this before on this show, recently even. I just think it's monumentally important that we, follow that change, like I used to say in my tagline all those years ago. Not just be aware of it, but watch it, follow it, be able to understand what you're seeing, or try to anyway. And so what I'm pointing out here is that this is something that is at the highest level of the conversation, like your neighbor in any context, like the kind of thing where these kind of conversations, or conspiracy theory, whatever you want to talk about, and you in your inner circle, you guys all know about it, but you don't assume your neighbor will know about it, right? Or your neighbor's 10-year-old son. So the idea that it's something that's outside of their, whatever that they look at. Today, I'm finding that the craziest things, you ask somebody about the wildest things, and you find that it's, whether it's because Facebook or social media today, I think a huge part of it, people are aware of these almost abstract topics. Like in this case, the idea of you own nothing and you've never been happier, or what is really the larger left, right, all of it, nonpartisan Great Reset that is still happening right now. That's what they're kind of talking about right here. And I got so much pushback when I talk about that continuing, and I still do. But what I notice is you have it on people like Tucker pointing things like that, them talking about it, not in the sense that it's like, it's almost as if they're trying to talk about it in a partisan way. But what I'm getting at is that it's something that everyone can see, and yet it's still regarded as not real in most circles. And I think that's part, like a larger kind of mass delusion we're going through. As I wrote, can we admit that everyone, well, actually, let me play a little part of it. I think it's 7 minutes. I'll play a little bit of it. And I think Tim Dillon does a great job on what he kind of outlines here, that they're trying to get us like societally away from even wanting the things that we've always been fighting for, which is not even that crazy of a thought, but in the context of left and right as one thing, and how it's driving us into this kind of new technocratic world that, again, we're all trying to point to.
I believe no one, for example, no one's trying to get anyone in this country to own a house. No, people pay lip service to the idea, but there's a lot of people now, a lot of them are my age, who have never owned a home and never will. And no one's wants them. They've forgotten what owning a home feels like. They've forgotten what it feels like to like have a yard where you can invite people over and drink a glass of wine and smoke a cigar and watch a game. And they live in a little apartment.
Now, you know what's crazy to me is right there. What he said right there could apply to like you could live in, bottom line, to make it quick, is that's something that you today almost sounds like some elitist, like for some of these people now, they're like, oh, well, it must be nice to have all the money. What he just described is something that everybody used to enjoy, whether you lived in some small place or, that it wasn't about wealth. It was about just, you get what I'm saying, is that being able to sit in your yard and have friends around. But he's right. It's something that almost is, whether it's because of some COVID social thing or just financial ability or just a changing of the way. There's a lot that's going on, but I agree with him. And if you still think somehow it's one side of our government, again, you're just not paying attention. This is very clearly still going on right now. And most conservatives, in my mind, are becoming increasingly, like right now, rapidly more so aware that is the reality. That this is, whether they think Trump is being tricked, which unfortunately is a huge part of that conversation, who have then just decided, well, he's the one being played, it must be Israel doing it. Whatever, I disagree. But as long as you're seeing the problem, that everyone, in my opinion, I'm saying that kind of facetiously. I shouldn't say facetiously, but I don't mean literally everybody, but just as a majority, people are starting to call these things out. And remember when like even the housing thing or most of these things were sort of a left conversation, it's become an all of us conversation. Americans are suffering. And the group that was supposed to put that back in the center has been screaming for, basically challenged everything they promised and put everything in the opposite direction. Higher spending, bigger government, more war. All of it is going the opposite direction. Do you think people don't see that? They do.
They type, they're on a MacBook. They're getting radicalized in any direction. They're upset. They're on dating apps or whatever, but they don't feel like they have a foundational core to their life. No one has really even given them the idea that they're going to get that. So I think that's just one of the things where they're basically saying like, no, you don't need a house and you're not getting a house, and forget what owning a house was. Like, forget that doesn't matter. And I think part of this is because they know, same thing with healthcare. There's no real movement to give anyone healthcare in this country. And if it is, it gets shut down immediately. So on the positive side, you might go, well, they know that AI is coming and that AI is going to do a lot of stuff with health, and it's going to help extend lifespans. But also on the negative side,
For the ultra wealthy, maybe.
they go, AI is going to disrupt the economy to a point where, like, we're not going to have people owning homes and cars and things like that. We're going to have a lot of people without a steady income, or they don't really know what to do. We're going to have a lot of wealth that's existed, a lot of capital, and we're going to have tremendous inequality. And we're going to have a lot of joblessness. So for sure, I think that they're preparing for that. I mean, there's no way you can look at the landscape because they're selling the country off for parts. And this is
It's statements like that. And again, it's not just, Tim Dillon is in an interesting category, as I pointed out before, but he's quasi, if not mainstream. Like, he has a huge audience. And this idea with the government, which means right now, and it's not just Trump, it's Biden or all, it's the government is as I think Charlie Robinson rightly put it, the analogy is like they're stealing the silverware from the White House. You know what I mean? It's like a cheaper level of fraud, but they're clearly just profiteering in a very shameless, very clear way. That gives you sort of the dying empire feel, doesn't it? Maybe that's by design. I don't know.
Both parties, and this is like, they're selling it off. And this is both parties, and this is like, they're selling it off for parts. So, I mean, obviously, something's coming. Something's coming for sure.
And we all seem to sense that right now. Like, and again, I don't say things like that too casually. I don't, I've maybe more so now because things are wildly abstract more than I'm used to. But at the end of the day, I'm not, I'm not one to just kind of, the idea is that when I'm saying that, because it's clear in my mind that it is a vast, like, you go out there and talk to people one-on-one, that's important, about just general ideas like that. Do you sense that something, because right now, even the government, in my opinion, wants us to feel that something's on the precipice, because that's something you can utilize. You can kind of try to direct that momentum. But acknowledging that we all sense that shows you that there is a common ground there, that all of us, left or right or aware that it's all nonsense, are sensing this, and we can use that momentum against them if we understand what it is and learn how to work together.
And I don't know when it is, and I'm sure the AI thing's overblown to an extent. And I think so much of our GDP depends on it that a lot of these companies are lying. But Anthropic's a creepy. These are creepy companies. I mean, they're just creepy.
Well, the amount of power that tech companies have in general is unprecedented. There's never been corporations. I mean, unless you go back to like the East India Corporation.
So, back to their point, sure would have been great if they were saying that back when we were like Palantir, before it was this all-encompassing, all-seeing eye that it was already like, it's crazy to even say that, because if you look into what Palantir was back when Jones was calling it a small Democrat thing that nobody cared about, and you're overblowing it because Israel, even then it was vast and alarming. And it's all, just to say vast and look at it now, it's like, it is insurmountable. It feels like it's all around the world. That's not what I'm getting into today, but we have talked about that extensively, and they overlap with that when it comes to the freedom cities, network state agenda, the idea of the growing technocratic change, like the cloud data. Every angle of this is tapped to these kind of people, whether individually or the companies. And it's just alarming. And so it would have been great if we could have been screaming about that to get people aware that was happening before they got Palantir jammed into everything in this country. But here we still are calling it out. They're talking about it. But, worry is that that's because now there's another phase to it. But either way, I'm glad it's being talked about. But my point, again, can we just admit that everyone sees this coming? Be sure to remember that those of us who were trying to draw your attention to this when we might have been able to stop it, right? I still genuinely think that we can. And be sure to remember who gaslit you right up until breaking the story after it was too late. Now, here's an example that everyone, again, this is such a common sharing, what left and right. This picture, of all these absolute clowns that came in and shared these binders that literally said the most transparent administration in history, and then went on to cover up the story. And I mean, not just cover that they showed, basically highlight what they put out and then ignore it. No, they went on to act like they did either that Epstein story never mattered in the first place or that what they did was enough. And that's not true. And everybody knows that. I mean, I'll get into another story in one of these next shows about Todd Blanche. I mean, I can just grab it really quickly. I think I've got it right here. I wanted to go into this more in depth, and I will if and when we go over this, because you've probably seen it. But Todd Blanche, where is it? Right here, probably. Yeah, here we go. He is getting further called out, as they all should, conceded that they violated the law on Epstein files. Like, I mean, and it's not necessarily that he said, yes, we did, but in his lack of response and the ones he gave, the judge made it clear. Well, there you go. Based on that, they violated these files, which we know, guys. They violated it by not giving you their own internal exchanges, which was part of the bill, the law. That's Bondi and Kash Patel. They both lied. So they lied, and they're covering it up to this very day. They've never investigated Zorro Ranch. There's at least 3 or 4 examples that I have argued were like the main ones that there's a lot, by the way, a lot they're failing on. But there's ones like the Zorro Ranch example that nobody could deny if you really look at it, with New Mexican politicians going, they've never even looked. I mean, it's just insane. But the point is that these people stood there and said, this is, the most transparent administration. What's that? DC Drano, libs of TikTok, like all is that Cat Turd? Is that guy? I forget. Whatever. All these guys are these ridiculous, they came out there and presented themselves as the new media and then covered up. And I said, what this person asked is, it blows my mind that anyone takes these people seriously. Now, look, there are people that do, or rather just feel like they're on the right side, and anything that they just choose to ignore, it's because it's the Democrats are doing bad things. We have to ignore that to help Trump, or whatever the broken mindset is. And then there are just those that don't care at all and just want to make money or want to, there's always that grouping. I am still of the mind that the majority of people, like I keep telling you, care about their own interest, their self-interest, not just doing whatever the team says, but actually getting what was promised, which they failed to deliver. One of them being the Epstein files. So on that point of whether they're taken seriously, I simply said, maybe the truth is that almost no one takes these people seriously. Nobody. And this whole new media push was the construction of a new algorithmically channeled and controlled online reality. Not a new opinion. So we end up screaming into the wind. Just a thought. Now, it's bigger than that when you think about it, because what I'm really trying to highlight is the mass delusion part of this, where there's like this construct laid over everything that's not real, and we can't look at anything without looking through that. And it's just, and it's almost as if even though we kind of know these people are artificial, it still somewhat drives the conversation. And it just seems like even saying that, it seems hard to even get out of that because so many people engage with it. And I mean, I even do, but that's mostly criticism. But I mean, people that sort of, anyway, I just think that's important to think about. The idea that this is a completely algorithmically false illusion of what's happening. And the majority of us are like, whoa, what is happening? We all see it, and they don't want you to acknowledge that reality. Now, on that larger MAGA point, Marjorie Taylor Greene came out and said, literally what I hear from everybody. This is a guy, a former Trump supporter, who says, I just wanted America first. 77 million people. Now, this is what I keep getting from people that go, no, you voted for this. Okay, well, maybe they did. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're hiding from that. But if you actually start talking to people, what I'm seeing, and most people that I know, including people close to me and all the ones they know who are saying we're done with Trump forever, all the flags I used to see are no longer on the polls. I mean, guys, I'm Tennessee. And if 77, her opinion anyway, or this person's opinion, if most people just wanted America first, which we can see this is not, then the question becomes, did most of them just say they wanted that and lied, or did they actually did? If you think they actually did, which seems to be obvious, then most of them are unhappy right now. A huge grouping of them keep quiet for plenty of reasons, unjustified, but they are unhappy. And as Marjorie Taylor Greene says, literally what I hear from everybody. I agree. I don't trust Marjorie Taylor Greene or any politician, but I think this is the reality. And I think what they're doing is just utilizing opportunism. There's an opening for them to gain in power by using what we want. It happens all the time. And then watch, I hope I'm wrong, but watch as they then deviate back into the plan when it suits them, which I'll make a point about that in a second. But again, if you haven't heard my point, most of the people who wanted to make America great again, who were part of what was the real MAGA movement, even if you didn't agree with how they wanted to do that, are either calling out this administration right now or no longer supporting it at all because Trump double-crossed them. Those people, even if you think it's a minority, those are the real MAGA people, the ones that actually believe they wanted what he promised. I find that to be insanely simple, and I say it every time, but I still get pushback from people. And maybe I'm wrong. I just think it's important. I think there's tons of honest Americans, left or right, who are starting to see that they've got far more in common with each other than they've ever had with anybody in Washington or anywhere else. And then to make this point, here's Tucker Carlson, kind of going back to the idea of deviating for he's been saying a lot of stuff that I think is spot on. But I'm very skeptical, like I always probably will be. And it's points like this that do that. Here's what he just said. I don't know how you could hold his opinion with what we're currently watching as he's criticizing the people working right next to him, saying the exact same things for what they're doing with Iran and elsewhere.
Would you think about, a campaign with and running alongside a J.D. Vance?
I would think about, well, I've said it a million times, it hasn't helped him much, but I really love J.D. and know him well, and I think he's a genuinely decent person whose values are ordered correctly. I think J.D. cares about his wife, God, his wife, his children, his nation. I mean, I know that. So, I love that there's a decent person.
I mean, even saying that that, doesn't that strike you as dishonest? I mean, just the idea, how could you, that's what he said. Maybe that's what the impression is that you gain. Are you in his mind? Can you somehow prove that these are dishonest, Paul? He has told you how politicians will lie to you. So we're not going to stand back and go, oh, maybe he's just feigning those things to get people like you to think he cares, like Trump becoming a Christian or a Republican, or it's just, come on, guys. So my gut tells me he doesn't even believe that. This is just about him lining up with the next person who seems to be aiming at the White House. And I find that to be crazy, because how can you be calling out what Trump is doing or all of this when Vance is right there with him, screening him all the way? It just doesn't make any sense. It can't.
In politics, there aren't many at all. I know that. So, I love that there's a decent person in politics. There aren't many at all. There's not one hand worth that I know personally.
Yeah, they're all in Peter Thiel's hands.
So, I'm always rooting for JD.
Yeah. I'm glad there's one decent, honest person. I mean, really? The guy's clearly not an honest person. I mean, it's just like every one of these conversations. He is a construct of the very people that you're starting to call out, Tucker. So it makes me worried that it's all part of some scam. Or maybe he doesn't see that. Like I keep saying, it's certainly possible that he is suddenly seeing everything and he's just not able to see through J.D. Vance. But I find that hard to believe. But we shouldn't assume, because it's actually in our interest to hope that these people are actually starting to change for the better. But never blindly assume that. Hold their feet to the fire, because it's rarely the reality, in my opinion. But no, Vance is the same problem, right? It's just, has to be clear by now. And just on a general point, here's the Donald Trump's administration puts this out. And of course, people are highlighting this as some kind of secret Q thing. It's like they're so obviously going through these Q things and trying to use that. But he posts this going, Trump 20 with his fake military stuff to pretend like he was in the military, because he keeps doing that because he wasn't. And then Obama, who, by the way, in case you don't know this already, hey, look, 2 war criminals, which in my opinion is the accurate way to look at that. You got all these clowns screaming back and forth about what this picture means and he's the worst or he's the better. Oh, Trump, it's just, it's it just gets tiresome. These people are both war criminals who both conducted the same types of war criminal acts through the same war criminal government, and they both should be held accountable, period. And I think probably most people are somewhere in there right now. So we're going to come back to this point, but the article came out on the 26th. U.S. Army begins fielding next generation battlefield biometric system. Now, the name for the general system, which, by the way, was already, they had a previous version. I got the other one highlighted. Hold on. It's the title right here. It's the automated biometric identification system. Now, they've had something like that for so many years now. This is the next generation multimodal version, which kind of encompasses a lot of different things all at once. And it's not something that has to be the original one's sort of like a master database they have to tap into. This apparently is something that doesn't have to do that. I'll go through it in a second. It's like real world, in the field, instantaneous sort of things. Now, the one point I think is important is that the system that is already in place that they're adding to, this is what ICE is already using domestically. And it shouldn't be that much of a shock, guys. It's everything they're doing with Flock and AI. It's not a secret, but we're going to come back to this. The reason I wanted you to think about this as we go through it is because I believe all of this is interconnected. This is a surveillance kind of control grid system that is being built. And if we can't see by now that one, that Israel is not just a part of it, but is literally in many cases dictating what happens in this country, and two, that most Americans are becoming aware of that. And even though that's the case, our government doesn't care, which shows you that the power structures aren't really what we tell ourselves they are. They just rule over us. Now, we're going to come back to that. What I want to start with on this is this is James Corbett. In my opinion, the most objective, honest, hardworking person in this field. Now, maybe I'm biased. I think Corbett is the GOAT. I think he's one of the best, if not the best person in this field. And I've always tried to strive for what he puts on the table. Because really, he's, and like I've told him before, he's, if not the one of the main reasons why I got into this in the first place. His open source investigation dynamic, all of it. And he's just a good person. You can just clearly see that by his long track record of caring about people, caring about the outcome, and trying to fight for what makes your life better, not just what makes his job work or makes him make more money, right? And it's very important to see that. Now, that all said, I'd say that any day of the week because I believe in it. But he has been somebody who has been very, very, he's articulate, he's fact-based, and has never been swayed by the pressure of the audience. And what I'm highlighting is for James Corbett to come out and say, it's official. The U.S. is now U.S. real, or however you say that. U.S. is real, the mashing of the two words. And it's not, look, you could have said this. I argue James would have said this years ago, which this is like an undeniable reality when he gets into the NDAA. And that's, and he's right. This is what's caught the eyes of a lot of normal people. Wait a minute, how can you be integrating those, especially with what they're doing in the world? Again, what people see. And also the reality, as James knows, goes back a long way before this. There's multiple examples of legislation that's already started to do this, whether or not this passes. And there's the Senate one, which he knows as well, in regard to the Senate intelligence version. There's already bills in the past that talk about integrating for, IDF, basically making IDF and U.S. military synonymous, like they're the same thing in the eyes of the U.S. government when it comes to resources doled out to people. It's crazy. But what I want to highlight, though, and you should read this, it's an excellent article as always, is that ultimately he's highlighting this because it's obvious, because it's fact-based, because it is easy to see and you can verify it for yourself. Now, whether or not you think this is outright control of everything or just wild amounts of influence to manipulate policy or somewhere in between, or, like in the context of it's happening, my point is, it's easy to document. I'm of the mind that it's possibly, whether it's about who's in power or not, it varies between absolute control over certain things and then just kind of fear-based manipulation. But guys, it's becoming obvious. And it's not about the Judaism religion. It's not about being Jewish or being Christian. It has a very clear factor, and that's what is utilized by this Zionist manipulation. But it's not. It is about the government of Israel manipulating the policy of the U.S. against the interest of Americans. And your government not only being okay with that, but facilitating that. So keeping this in mind, I want to make a couple points about Charlie Kirk, because somebody recently reached out to me and asked about basically when we covered this last time, and this was basically where we left off. A lot has changed since this show, September 12th, 2025. The title was Israel involved with Charlie Kirk's death? Let's look at the facts. I argued at that moment that was obviously where the facts were pointing. A lot has developed since then. Now, I haven't done a re-follow-up on this conversation, which I probably should have, but to me, it felt like it was obvious largely then, and it's only moment by moment become just kind of more acknowledged by the average left-right audience, from what I can see. I've talked about this with Steve. I pointed to this briefly on the show, but somebody asked me, and I felt, okay, it's worth reiterating what I do think, and I think this is obvious for a lot of reasons, and Steve and I have talked about this, but I do want to stress that I still argue, as much as the evidence is wildly clear, it's largely circumstantial, which even though that can be clear, it's not something you would argue is verifiable or provable in a court of law. And that matters to me. But I think it's clear that where my opinion is on this, and I think it's clear. So I wanted to go through this briefly, just so you know that, and then you can go through the information for yourself. And guys, I'll go over the extra stuff, the tangential stuff afterward, because just my reiteration of the points of why this all kind of lines up for me. But this was an interesting show. And again, on the 12th, I think it was pretty clear. Carrie Wedler, I'll include this as well, wrote an article called "The Charlie Kirk Hysteria is a Blueprint for Future Political Chaos." Just nailed the reality that on top of it, even just in a never letting a good crisis go to waste kind of mindset, how they were already utilizing this in ways that were incredibly dishonest, insulting, using Charlie Kirk's name to try to censor people, which is exactly, Bondi saying, go after hate speech. Well, he made explicit statements about how that shouldn't be the case. Just nothing sacred. And it's right here, in fact. Yeah, I'll include it in the show notes, but I want you can listen to it for yourself.
There's free.
But it's worth reading, by the way, so you can understand that. But here's a clip that I saw around today, and I'll play another clip that goes into some of the kind of quick points about this. But you've seen this, most likely. I played one version of this, I think, on the show. But what you're going to see is some anomalies. Then this is real footage. You can double check it for yourself. Now, this, again, circumstantial. You could argue that there's an unknown that makes it all make sense, as I've always pointed out. But I, too, think that this makes, add it with everything else. Now, that's the point. I'm not going to rehash everything, but if you've watched our previous show or you've gone through the majority of what's been seen, this just adds a lot to the question of what were these people doing? Why was the scene treated the way it was afterward? Why did nobody immediately take control of the scene? Why did people take things and take off? Like with the camera, the chair was moved. I mean, guys, there's just no way that lines up. And it's the same with most of the rest of these. Tyler Robinson, these things are clear. Like, not clear that we know for a fact what did happen, but clear that there's obvious manipulation going on. And they just let it sit. I think that says a lot. But this person, Dr. Etiquette, says they were more concerned with putting items in their pockets than they were with tending to Charlie. So here's the immediate aftermath in this clip. And it pauses, and I'll read the text for you. So just pay attention. The guy jumps over, grabs something, and does a paper. I mean, I'd say that's pretty obvious. I don't know what you could what you would make sense of why he would hop this table. And then, what were we doing right there? Again, there's always the possibility that there's something we just don't know that then makes it make sense. That's always possible. Now, these two bring into contact, and they do appear to exchange something. They say it's a remote detonator. And then this guy leaped the table as if he was going to help, then runs off to the other side. Now, that of all of it, how do you make sense of that? Why would you go, oh no, he got shot, jump over the table, and then run around the corner and leave? Maybe because, just to make something up, right? Maybe because he thought the shooter was on the other side and he's running away. That kind of would make sense, but what he put in his pocket, why did they exchange something? It's all something considering, Okay, so that's a better shot because he stops. Oops. He stops over there, clearly looks for Charlie, and then so, if he jumped the table and ran as fast as he could, I would say that kind of maybe he thought the you could argue the shooter was on the other side of him. But the way that happens, I'm just going to tell you personally, in my opinion, nothing, it's just circumstantial. That seems very suspicious. Here's another guy. He dives down after that guy jumped the table on the right. That's something. I don't know why, I don't know why he would dive, because you understand, he turned, he acknowledged there was a shot fired, then ran around and then kind of dumped down, even though he was security. Does something, clearly. But maybe, who knows, maybe something fell out of his pocket. He put it back in. Just being, hypothetical. He runs away again. So this guy, same thing. And both these guys were basically standing security. So he jumps over, falls down, seems to grab something, runs away. This guy jumps the other side, seems to put something in his pocket, bumps in the guy, runs away. Wouldn't they be there? Wouldn't the first thing they do be protecting the guy they were standing there protecting? Or going to see if he's okay? Guys, that's, again, I'm not saying this is absolute, to me, it's clear evidence of something that we haven't been explained. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't somebody have taken the effort to do this, especially those that are acting like they're fighting for Charlie? Seems pretty strange to me. So you watch that a few times, guys. I feel like it's hard to deny. And you could, the full thing you could find is exactly the clip. Found that very strange. But again, most of this we've already covered. Not this explicit, dynamic with what he highlighted, but just, we've seen the video. We've seen the weirdness of what happened afterward. It's like most of these scenes, or the alleged assassination on Trump. It's just, if you're not blinded by partisanship and you just stood back and made it about anybody else, you'd be like, okay, clearly something is wrong. There's no way that all lines up. But people ignore it because they have an agenda. Now, here's a clip from that same person. I forget it, however you pronounce that. And I don't think that's her, but I think she's posting it. But basically kind of doing a quick run through. And you know how much I hate these TikTok style videos, but it's just something that has a quick sort of a breakdown of the different points that I thought was just done and quick, so we don't have to take too much time on it. But it's worth your time. I would go through this in depth if you want to find out more. But what I'm saying is, from my research, it seems to all kind of end in a circumstantial point. That's not to say that it's irrelevant. Frankly, I argue most of this would probably be enough in a court of law to convince a jury, but doesn't mean that it's absolute proof, if that makes sense. But here's the clip.
Theory that Charlie Kirk was killed by an explosive placed in his wireless mic is growing in popularity. And when you look at the reenactments done online, side by side, you can't help but notice the way that the shirt moves.
Now, what you're seeing for the podcast is somebody who did sort of a reenactment of this, which, you can get into whether it was, the same thing and how would he know what kind. So there's all sorts of anomalies. But the point is using something and trying to recreate what they thought it would be done with some kind of mic explosion and seeing kind of air, showing the shirt blow up and the mic, and the necklace and so on. Take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? The idea for me is not necessarily this kid's reenactment, but the idea of the likelihood of something that, how this would have been done hypothetically if this was what we're talking about. And it does make a lot of sense. Again, this is not, like I said, I'm going to say it again and again. This is not proof, but it does have a lot of weight, because if this was what we were told, there would be a lot of different things would have happened afterward, including the evidence that we do not have. I mean, it's so weird how we can go down the list of all the different things that have happened in Trump's administration. And I'm not saying it's only about Trump, but see how many weird anomalies we have like that, where the very evidence, which they would have demanded if it was the other side of the story, just doesn't even get followed up on.
The way that the necklace moves and the way that the body moves are so similar. And now Tucker Carlson is openly saying that he believes that Charlie Kirk was killed because...
believe he was most likely murdered for his evolving views on Israel.
Now, again, to be objective about that, he obviously is saying, because this got a lot of talk and people said, oh, you said Israel killed him. And, that's not what he said. You could argue he means that, but at the end of the day, he simply said he thinks he likely got killed for his views on Israel, which is very obvious. That doesn't mean we can prove that, but look, as I'll go through at the end of this, again, just a quick overview of the timing of what he was saying and what happened and his donors. There was an amazing amount of pushback that put him in a very dangerous situation because he was calling out Zionist influence on the United States. So what was happening? And it was a whole spinning out conversation. So that's if you're just being an objective person outside of politics, you're going to go, yeah, well, that's obviously one of the most likely examples because it was very contentious. That's what he's saying. And then all of a sudden you get this kind of changing conversation. He's out there, he's like switching and saying, basically calling out his previous statements, which I even agree with, that he was wrong, saying, all Muslims are one thing, just like you shouldn't say all Jews are one thing. But it's an interesting kind of evolution of his conversation. That's why I'm pointing to that Vance clip. I just don't trust it.
Which is interesting when it comes to the exploding mic theory, because almost exactly a year before Charlie Kirk's assassination, Israel attacked Hezbollah with exploding walkie-talkies and pagers in an operation called Grim Beep.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel. Shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. The world is our stage.
Did you see any surprises in Gaza?
Surprises?
Yeah. Like intelligence surprises.
Pages, walkie-talkies. You know how many equipment, treated equipment do we have in these countries? You don't. I do.
You mean you mean booby-trapped equipment?
Not only booby-trapped.
And spying.
Manipulated equipment. All right?
In which countries are you talking about?
All the countries that you can imagine.
And then you look at what TPUSA has done. They've put his handheld mic on display, but where's the wireless one? Brian Harple, Charlie Kirk's security, said that in the hospital, he cut his freedom shirt off. Where is that? Isn't that evidence? What if there's shrapnel on it? Speaking of which, this is what an exploded Rode wireless mic looks like. And when you freeze frame Charlie's hand the moment after the attack, that's what a lot of people believe they are seeing on his hand. And in October of 2025, Ian Carroll brought up the fact that there was an explosives factory that was wiped off the map in Tennessee that had government contracts that made mic packs. And immediately after Charlie Kirk's assassination, UVU did complete construction in the area where he was assassinated, and people wondered if it was to cover up evidence. And now you have to wonder if the evidence they were trying to hide was from an exploded mic.
Now, a lot, there's points in there that are worth considering, but, a lot of it becomes hypothetical, which we should be asking questions, right? It's always important to consider these things. Just let's not pretend like it's absolute. But the interesting overlap and the timing of the pager attack, of the idea of what they're bragging about and what we're seeing in other contexts, it's a lot to ignore, guys. Now, the point, before we get into the next segment here, if you remember, is that there was a massive change happening. It came out, you can point to Harrison from InfoWars putting out a tweet, which is, as far as I can tell, the first time this became the statement that was made, where he was saying Charlie Kirk was worried about the Zionist Israeli base that was basically up. He was worried he was going to get killed. That was the statement. Now, what was happening is Candace called this out, saying that he was, it was kind of starting, but then after the fact, it all kind of came out more, which was that he was upset because he was. This is my opinion about everything other than my opinion that it's more about the Zionist versus the Judaism influence. It's all what was actually stated. But my point is, what I believe is that he started to recognize that Zionism influence in the U.S. And so he's been screaming about supporting Israel for a long time, and that U.S. should. But then you saw the deviation in his content. He started talking about Israel influencing U.S. policy, talking about how it was not, he wasn't allowed to speak out about things. Then he started getting attacked by the Zionist billionaires, the people that were donating to him, got circled and got accused of things. He tried to tell Trump he shouldn't go into Iran, that they were tricking him, and he got yelled at. Like, he was speaking about all this. And so the point is that overall, you could argue that he just got kind of got upset by what was happening. But I argue what he began to notice is what the whole country started to notice. That you could support Israel. I don't support the government of that country at all. But you can decide you want to support what you believe Israel is, even though if we can get into the reality of the foundation of what it actually is. The point, nonetheless, is that there's a whole movement of Christians that believe it's sacred. That's a whole different thing than realizing a Zionist organization has hijacked that and is influencing your government that you believe is America first. And if you notice that, you start to see the linchpin. You start to recognize the weak point of the whole thing. And with Charlie Kirk being, if you remember, that his base through Turning Point USA was the battleground for the Israel conversation. That was the most alarming grouping of the age demographic for Israel. The ADL was saying that long before this. And so if you start to put this together and realize that Charlie Kirk, who is speaking to the audience that had the most influence in the most problematic situation for Israel, started to say, maybe they're a problem, you can put together why what's going on in the world could lead to that. I find that to be insanely obvious. But you can decide if you think it's actually the case, because it's not something I can prove. The reality of the information is hard to ignore. And so going forward, it's worth considering that, especially if things continue to happen in this country. So on that note, the recent show we did on the 7th, the obvious Israeli infiltration of the U.S. government is now acceptable to acknowledge. Why? Now, it could be some kind of organized deviation, to get us to look a different direction, or like the release valve, whatever you want to call it. I sort of get the sense, though, that you're getting pushback from people that are pure opportunists. That's what most people in Congress are, or politicians. And so what you're starting to recognize is that they see the Americans are turning from Israel. And so there's going to be more and more of them that lean into that, even if they get attacked by Israel. It's about, is the juice worth the squeeze anymore? Is it valuable enough to them to take the attack if the U.S. people, like a Massey, will come flooding to support you? I think that's obvious. And it's whether they have something on you or not, right? And so I think what it is that this change in conversation is allowing people to start to talk about it. And then you got more and more people who are shameless profiteers and opportunists. Most of media, most of politicians are starting to follow along if they can. That's my opinion anyway. I think if we go forward enough, we'll be looking back on this, realizing how far ahead we were in this conversation, like so many others. I'm sure that won't get acknowledged because it never really does, but so be it. So on that note, with the infiltration, I want to make a point about this that goes to this very day. And it's about one group, it's about Microsoft, but it goes well beyond Microsoft. I hope our audience knows that by now. But this is kind of a spotlight on Microsoft that shows you, you take your pick of these conversations and you start pulling the strings. You will, and it's not some name connected to a play. You'll find Unit 8200, Israeli intelligence, government entities tied into this stuff. And, it becomes undeniably obvious with what they're doing, not just the hypothetical, what they could do. Now, Microsoft deepened ties with Israel military to provide tech support during the war. This was January 23rd, 2025. So just showing you clearly on the surface, it was being seen that Microsoft was leaning into Israel during a genocide. And that speaks for itself, I argue, but it was something that got called out. At that time, though, before it was getting too dangerous, this actually the year before, but later, February, so 2024, but the year before, DARPA selects Microsoft to continue the development of, guess what? Utility scale quantum computers. Now, that would have been great for me to include in my quantum show. I forgot about this, but either way, showing you that DARPA is working with Microsoft. Now, you may not think it's a problem, but follow along. You may think it is in a second. Now, this was the Gray Zone discussing this in 2025, how Microsoft became a hub for Israeli intelligence. And you read this, it's very well done. And it's actually from a group called Do Not Panic. But it's you can't deny this. It gets called out by people at the company, which it does again in a second. But this was happening in 2025. People saying this company is becoming basically a carve out for Israeli intelligence. Now, WikiLeaks came out in 2025 in August and said leaks reveal that Microsoft was helping Israel deploy their Azure cloud, which Azure is being overlapped with all sorts of things, including ICE, by the way, for mass surveillance and airstrike planning. Leaked documents reveal Microsoft's Azure cloud was used by Israel's Unit 8200 for mass surveillance on Palestinians. So that's just about Palestine. But it's showing you that as they're being called out and even starting to tell their people that we're going to stop doing that, they actually leaned in harder and started to work with them and allowing them to use their cloud AI service, basically, which again is being used to surveil Americans, to surveil Palestinians as they murdered them. Now, continuing to see this overlap, you already probably understand the concern of seeing Microsoft have such a close relationship with government and Israel opening a back door, if you will, which is what they do. Now, in September, Microsoft revoked, they claimed, Israel's access to AI and Azure cloud services after Mossad's Unit 8200, get this, was found to be using the software to mass surveil Palestinians. Despite the fact that you can easily go through the WikiLeaks documentation, guys, they knowingly were doing this. Their own employees were calling them out for it. So this is their effort to go, oh no, we didn't know they were doing the bad thing that we let them do, and pretended to stop. Pretended. June 2026, the Canary, a Microsoft worker has quit and sent a mass email detailing Microsoft's complicity in surveillance tech Israel uses to hunt Palestinians. Now, I'm sure you can consider how it could be used to hunt more than just Palestinians and more than just Gaza, because this is all around the world. Not just Microsoft, guys, but what they're utilizing all of this for. So this Zachary Foster shared this. A Microsoft employee in Italy has exposed the company, it's around the globe, guys, for its deep involvement in apartheid Israel's genocide of the Palestinians, which it should be enough for you to understand what these companies are doing and what they're willing to do, not just to Palestinians, but it goes much beyond that, as we'll show you in a second. First, here's the article from the Canary. This is insane, guys. On the final days of his at the company, a Microsoft worker in Italy sent out an email to thousands of colleagues informing them of how the corporation operates as the technological backbone of the Gaza Holocaust perpetuated by the so-called Israel. Now, think about the technological backbone as Donald Trump and his new world order build the first freedom city, the first network state under this new plan. That's the new Gaza, which they're planning with digital tokens and digital AI surveillance and all the stuff that we're all fighting. The point is that this is what it's being built into. That matters. Now, it says, this is what he wrote. After nearly 2 years as a critical environment technician at a Microsoft Italy data center, I chose to resign. This is because right now, Microsoft is massively expanding its European data centers, aka mass surveillance centers, to use Palestine as a laboratory for its experimental digital weaponry. Now, what would it be experimental for? What would that be practice for? I'm sure you can work that out about where this, what they've done before is bomb in Gaza and kill and use weapons and then go, oh, hey, world, this is battle tested. And we sell it to you in that way. Think of it the same way, except now it's being tested there to be utilized elsewhere after they figure out the bugs. For the past 994 days, Microsoft has powered the genocide of our people in Palestine, and the company's European data centers are fundamental to how Microsoft abets crimes against humanity. On August 6th, he writes, 2025, reports exposed how Microsoft hosted 11,500 terabytes, the link is right there, of intercepted Palestinian phone call data in the Microsoft Netherlands data center, with additional data stored in the Irish data center amounting to 200 million hours of audio. We were just talking about this kind of surveillance using the flock cameras and showing you that there's a flock person at the high levels of it that's an Israeli intelligence, literally works with Israeli military intelligence for most of his citations come from military intelligence. And then, of course, the overlap with all the other things we discussed yesterday, Leonardo and Signal Trace and Sight, all of them being packed with Israeli intelligence. This trove of mass surveillance data has been described as, quote, one of the world's largest and most intrusive collections of surveillance data over a single population group. Yeah, until they realize they're doing it to you right now, and it's been ongoing for a very long time. This data is used by the Israeli military to identify targets for airstrikes, arrests, blackmail from the entire Palestinian population. It is also used as training data to build AI targeting programs like Hopsora and Lavender, what we talked about. I'll include one of those for you. I think it's that's the easy way to do it. There's the newer one, Lavender, the AI machine directing Israel's bombing spree. And yes, that is utilizing Palantir technology. So it continues. These programs build AI training programs. These programs invent arbitrary justifications to murder non-combatants, intentionally adding civilian workers to the Israeli military's generated target bank. The program also facilitates massacres of entire families at once, because we all know this. They've been caught time and again of murdering in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, and killing people because they not even changing something to say they're not civilian, just killing civilians with no concern. Noir, the person citing this, went on to highlight Microsoft's pseudo-investigation of the above, amounting to a whitewash. He said Microsoft colluded with the terror regime in Tel Aviv to shift the data off Dutch servers and into occupied Palestine, sometimes incorrectly referred as Israel. So the point is, it's right to this very day, exactly the same situation, even though they lied about it. So here's why, on top of 1,000 other things we can get into, I find this so alarming. The General Services Administration secures a $3.1 billion OneGov agreement with Microsoft to accelerate AI adoption. So not even just Microsoft, which would be alarming enough, but also to accelerate AI adoption, that's where this all kind of intersects. And Israel is playing a massive role in this new system they're building. And now you have Microsoft on top of this obviously Israel involvement through Microsoft in the GSA. And my point is, this is a spotlight. It's one example of an undeniable, just kaleidoscope of obvious infiltration. The U.S. General Services Administration announced a multi-billion-dollar OneGov agreement with Microsoft, delivering steep discounts on Microsoft 365. Great. We're still using that old garbage. Copilot, Azure Cloud Services. There you go. The very thing that we know and can prove that they have wormed their way into, and other technologies. The partnership is expected to generate $3.1 billion in savings for agencies in the first year. Hooray. I mean, it just goes, it never stops. Your government knows this. Now, on top of that, Elon Musk's Grok AI inks deal with Trump administration to integrate with the government. We talked about that in 2025. So remember, you have Twitter, which he turned into X, which is based on the idea of the original, this is the article we covered this on, the quiet transition from DARPA's XAI to Elon's XAI. Takes over Twitter, calls it X, right? At that time, on 2024, you can show DARPA just finishing up its XAI. Actually, I think I can get it to come up, actually. Hold on. I'll be right here. But they're just wrapping up their XAI program. There it is. Which was about explainable artificial intelligence. What a coincidence. DARPA's XAI program. Okay. Very quickly after this, he buys Twitter, calls it X. Then you can see very quietly, but you can see it, how he basically turns it into XAI. He starts XAI and then merges the two. That is also in here. They merge the two into one ultimate thing. And that becomes his AI system. But then he smashes together his other company. Basically, this becomes one massive thing. And so what I'm highlighting is that then on top of all of that, Grok's AI, which is Twitter, which is the surveillance, which is infiltrated with Israel through Authentics, through CHEQ, through multiple things, integrates with the government. I mean, what does that even mean? It becomes some massive blob, and this is what Trump has allowed to happen. I argue Biden would have done the same thing, but who know? I think that is obvious. Left and right's the same deal. Okay, but the transition from DARPA's XAI to Elon's XAI is an important transition from, total information awareness to Palantir. It's what it always has been. It's a government ongoing program. In my opinion, you please take the time to look into it for yourself. Include that as always. Make sure you go through that show. I think it's a good one. Now, also, this was just to show you what Grok is, what they're doing, at least on Twitter, to be honest. Not to be honest, but to be clear. And like Grok versus Twitter, in this case, what Twitter's doing to Grok. U.S. Israel committed genocide, said Grok. And then they suspended him. Literally, Twitter, you all remember this. Musk said, oops, it was an error. So their AI goes, yeah, that's an obvious genocide. So they censor it. No, what they do is they tweak it and put it back out. So you can see that as Grok AI becomes part of the government, it's something that they're just altering to be what they want. It's not hard to see. So keeping that in mind with what we're talking about, and that's, again, if you've watched this show long enough, I could go on for 10 hours about the obvious and undeniable amount of, an unending list of Israel backdoors into the U.S., into the government, into controlling what happens in this country. But keeping that one point there and the rest of them in your mind, and here, I'll just play this actually. It's okay. I could play the many different clips of people saying that. What I'm thinking of is the people that might not think that Microsoft point was enough to argue that Israel's infiltrating. But if you take the time to understand what they're doing all around the world and how clearly they're, you can listen to Netanyahu saying these things in Hebrew if you just pay attention. But my point, though, is to realize what they're doing, realize what they're trying to drive into the world, whether genocide or infiltration, and then look, in this case, about what they even did to their own people. And you may not remember this. People that don't even know about this may surprise you, but it shouldn't if you pay attention. This is BM highlighting first on this the 25th. And this has been publicly put out now. And again, this is the show we've done back on June 18th, 2024. The undeniable reality of October 7th foreknowledge and the Hannibal Directive. It's not even debatable at this point, guys, but it's just people still push back because there's dishonesty out there. But on October 7th, 2023, early morning, Israeli police commander in the center says, Gaza, break it all apart, along with the soldiers who got abducted. So hit Gaza, along with the soldiers who got abducted. It's right on the surface. In the first hours of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, while conversing with Israel's police chief, another senior officer calls to implement the Hannibal Directive and destroy Gaza along with the Israeli captives. This is an additional part to what we've already been talking about. As I'll show you next, we have examples of the people in the military themselves openly stating that. I don't need to convince those of you that pay attention. It's been clear for a long time. But this is new information if you haven't seen it. The unit decides there's a hostage situation inside the safe rooms, terrorists holding the girl or her family, and they decide to attack the location. Here's the follow-up. This one is from June 27th. IDF Southern Command's intelligence officer, October 9th, 2023. I'm going to say something harsh now. Be strong. We view the 100 hostages we have inside the Gaza Strip as dead. That's what he said. It's right here, documented on their own. I mean, this is Israeli Channel 12 putting this out, guys. Think about how crazy that is. And think about how we've been screaming about this. BM's been screaming about this since since months after October 7th. And you can prove it. And yet in this government right now, Biden or Trump will call you a conspiracy theorist. All of our governments will shout you down. The corporate media and most of the independent alternative media, or independent mainstream media, will call it fake news. But here it is being admitted to. Here's one of the obvious examples going back a long way. This was reposted, but this is an old clip from right in the beginning. Here's what he says.
Well, why is the destruction then? I'm sorry. Why is the destruction? It looks like more like a
cause of our tanks attack.
fight on them.
Yeah, because they were blocked in these houses, and we need to conquer back the whole settlement, and it couldn't be happened without the tanks.
Right. So they had hostages in the house. It's one of the famous stories because this is the one where the hostage came out later and said, there's people in there, and they opened fire. And she testifies to that to this day. He says, well, we had to conquer it back. So the order was, we take it back no matter what. Those people are considered dead. You already heard that. That's what we know, guys. This is not debatable at this point. Watch the show if you want to go back and see how obvious it was right in the beginning. But the reason I'm bringing this up is to realize this is what Israel's doing to its own people when it has an agenda. Frankly, I see it no different than what our government would do to us if it wanted that, had an agenda. But just realizing what that means for the rest of the, what's playing out right now. It's possible that's the case because of them. An additional point you might not have seen. Several police documents on the security for the October 7th, 2023 Nova Music Festival had been deleted from the Israel police computer system. This is about as bad a cover-up as the Epstein debt. Yep. Well, I wonder why. Just like we get the Israel propaganda where they continue to get caught lying and you wonder why it's so bad and clumsy. Who knows? This appears to be what they do. Just blunt, clumsy, we can do what we want. And the reality is, guys, it's been this bad the entire time. There's been some kind of a block. People afraid to speak out, controlling of the power structures. But the reality, they delete this, shows you that they're covering things up on top of the fact that, as we remember, several of the very survivors from that rave where they were being shot, or rather, you could prove on video in 2 examples, IDF members were using them as human shields, literally hiding behind them on the car and shooting at the, like the other 17 examples I can show you from October 7th forward or well before that. But several survivors of the rave were involuntarily committed to psychiatric hospitals. These are the victims. It's been clear from day one, guys. They covered this up. They attacked their own people, and then they covered that up too. Now, Robert wrote this on May 20, 2026. Israel revives the October 7th hoaxes. Just remember that everything, babies on a clothesline, babies in an oven, they made them up, guys, all of them. And you could prove that more than almost anything. They revived those in May of 2026 to cover up its mass rape of Palestinians that was getting more and more attention. Also, what they are allowing and supporting as they come out in protest of the right to rape Palestinians. That is who we're talking about. Now, in the reality of covering up things and psychological operations, hoaxes, things like that, this is what we're getting from the Zionist side of this conversation. It's worth considering that when it comes to what might be happening in this country. So Tim Anderson breaks this story down, and this is directly from Ynet News. The rising tide of anti-Semitism scam exposed. Now, as I'll always point out, that doesn't mean there's no such thing or that it's not examples you can find. It's about the game that's being played to point to either fake events or people saying free Palestine as anti-Semitism. It's not the case. I mean, it certainly could be an overlap, but it's not the reality of those statements. As well as the fact that what we're going to show here is deliberate faking of these events. Florida prosecutors seek a significant prison term for an Israeli Michael Ron David, dual citizen. Let's not forget the police report on the fake anti-Jewish stunts in Sydney. Police reveal fake terror plot after politicians spread false anti-Semitic motivation. Like Stefanik saying they were marching in the school saying kill the Jews, even though the police sat in front of Congress and said I was there, it didn't happen. Or the girl getting stabbed in the flag with eye with the flag when it didn't even touch her. Or I'll give you a string of them in a second. And these are just passing examples. What you're going to see here is you can't deny this, guys. This is from Ynet News, Israeli media, June 23rd. Michael Ron David Cater, a dual Israeli-American citizen, previously known as the Ashkelon hacker, appeared in an Orlando federal courtroom this week to face sentencing proceedings for a massive wave of bomb threats that paralyzed communities across the United States in 2017. Prosecutors are seeking a significant prison term for the defendant who was convicted of orchestrating thousands of hoax threats against Jewish community centers, schools, airlines, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Funny how that's not taken into context, and funny how you can point back at many of those that they then screened were proof that everyone hated And they're still doing that. Now, that's not to say there's not people out there doing something you call that. But the idea, first of all, of you feeling something, hating something, saying something, there is no law against that. The idea that they then use that to, I mean, actually, I'll get to that more in a second. We're going to talk about something about that. But this, guys, is not a unique, not an isolated incident. Thousands of them from this one guy. Now, that's not to say that every Jewish person or every Zionist is out there doing that, but it's obvious that what we're seeing is a manufactured dynamic, like we keep seeing through the Columbia protests. When you have Jewish Voices for Peace putting it on, when you got Holocaust survivors out there sitting in unison, telling you they support what they're doing, and that gets framed in a racist, anti-Semitic protest, guys, it's a construct, and we are being played by the Zionists who clearly have an influence over what is being done in this country. You can't deny that at this point. And again, that's what most Americans seem to be understanding at this point. So thousands of them, one example, but here's just a thread that I'll give you to watch. Just this opening clip is just so ridiculous. As Syrian Girl says, call to action for my followers. Find me all the videos where Zionists pretended to be attacked by protesters. This video is so insane. And I've seen this one before. This guy's walking by himself. He's not touched. And they're basically just calling him out. And that's what he does. You hit me, he says, and he runs over to get the police. Look at that acting. Look at that. All the police circle around. Watch it again. That's just a dishonest person, guys. That's a manipulative, lying person. But it goes on. I mean, there's so many of these. This one starts screaming the same way. You've hurt me. No one touches her. Police, help me. This one, there's two down here of Shmuley, which are just no surprise. Does the same thing. One doesn't even get touched and he runs over and says he was hit. One, this guy basically puts his hand on his shoulder to say something to him and he goes, oh my God, and calls the police. I mean, it just doesn't stop. Now, again, that's not every person of any kind of anything, guys. It's about these people and these dishonest people. You can have people that do this in any faith, of any religion, of any color. It doesn't matter. They're dishonest people. But it happens right now more than ever because there's an agenda. And that's what we're seeing through this Zionist control structure, guys. Now, understanding on top of all that, what they're doing in general, but the Palestinians, but it's more than just Gaza, as you understand. Lebanon, it's the same kind of dynamic. If you haven't seen this, the show we just did, UN finds that Israel, quote, continues to commit genocide by deliberately targeting Palestinian children. So it's an additional follow-up. You all know this already. It's just even more evidence. And I'll include those for you. Here's the Reuters article. Israel targets Gaza children in resulting genocide. And then here's the UN. Israel continues to commit genocide by deliberately targeting Palestinian children. Here is, I forget her name, but somebody in the Knesset, Israeli government. And as Ken O'Keefe rightly frames it as, because that's what you're getting from a lot of these Zionists online right now, there is no genocide. But then here is somebody in the Israeli government saying, anyway, we're proud of this Holocaust Jews did, which is what she says. In my opinion, that's because that's how it's always framed. And really, there's always a translation thing as well. And like I pointed out, there is that the word is synonymous when it comes to what they say in Hebrew. My point, though, is that when they talk about this from Israel's government position, it is always about, this, as simply saying the state of the Jews, right? And then you turn around and say, then why did the Jews do that? And then you're racist. Whoever is saying that wherever it happens, because that's what happened. They're the ones saying that, then why would say, it's because it's a trap, guys, because Zionism is about utilizing this to try to hide what they do. And so that's what I believe. But either way, she says, I am personally proud of the Holocaust in Gaza. And then 80 years from now, I've already shown you this clip, they will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did. I mean, who knows if that's a translation thing or even just that that's the point. Because then they'll come around and say, see, that's what then the whole thing starts again, where it becomes the focus on the Jewish religion as opposed to the Zionist organization committing a genocide. Even though there is undeniably an overlap of the two. You can't deny that. Right on the surface. Mohammed Safa pointing out Israel, and this is on the 27th of June, is still killing children in Gaza, and it no longer even makes headlines. Every day. The Cradle pointing out in the West Bank on the 28th. Because it hasn't stopped anywhere. Guys, footage of this shows Israeli occupation bulldozers just uprooting trees. You know, often they try to lie about that. We don't do that. We're fighting off their terrorism. No, they're out there just destroying Palestinian life because that is what Israel has always been doing. Bulldozing trees because that's how they survive. That's how they make money. That's how that's about the cultural. They hate them. Period. And if you want any, I mean, I don't know how anybody could deny any of this, quite frankly. Look at that. I mean, that first one is just so unparalleled, guys. Look at that. Clear before and after. Satellite imagery of 8 towns systematically erased by Israel and Gaza. It says they didn't even leave a single road untouched. This is what Amalek meant. This is what the idea of not a stone upon a stone. They wanted to make it a parking lot. We've heard them all say these things, from the government, I mean. Look at that, guys. Is that pinpoint targeting? Every location in that entire town had a hotel, I mean, it's not even worth joking about. That is obvious genocide. Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter. They try to lie about all that too. You get the point. It's insane. And as we've been talking about a long time, guys, this is going to be remembered for 1,000 years, if not longer. And people will be looking back, just like the conversations of history today, going, what did you do? What did you do, mommy? What did you do, daddy, when this was happening? Did you do something? Just stand up? Oh, no, I was complicit, right? No, we allowed it to happen. No, I fought people trying to call it out, right? That's what some of the, they're never going to say that. The truth, though, is that's going to happen. And you can ask yourself that, as always. What did you do? What were you doing when this was happening? This is why I continue to say that everyone sees this, just like the other conversation, guys. You really think that people can look at this and not understand what that shows you? The average people? This has 626,000 views. They know this, guys. The average people know what that is. Only blind partisan followers and Zionists are claiming this is not a genocide. But that's a lot of people, though, when you think about it. Even if it's 1%, that's a ton of people. It's more than that, though. The majority knows, in my opinion. Unfortunately, it's clear that only sociopaths and profiteers end up in positions of power and influence. All right? Because sadly, it seems we need positions of power and influence to change whatever is happening today. Now, I don't actually think that's the reality, but that's what it feels like because we don't have enough momentum. We don't work together. The division of the party system. That's what it is. Now, talking about the flock camera AI point before we get into Iran and the updates to finish. I just went over this show just did the show on the 26th, and I want to make one quick point about the title. It kind of, I mean, maybe it's probably not even needed. I doubt most of you took it the wrong way, but I got more than one comment about this, and I thought that was strange. So the title was clearly, "You are a terrorist if you resist data centers." And I guess a lot of people thought that I was like siding with the data centers. Like, that's not true. They're the terrorists. And I'm like, well, wait, I'm not claiming that you're attacked. The point was that's how you're being framed. Maybe I could have stated that better. But I'd like to think our work is very clear. And if you watch even the opening, you get the sense, but I get it. People, headline title skimmers, they're everywhere. But the point was that you're being framed as a terrorist if you push back, rightly so, on these data centers and Israel's infiltration of Flock and AI surveillance. Now, Flock was only one example I could find. It was a person who's had multiple connections to his origin as well as continual support from the Israeli military intelligence side. And he's a leading person at Flock. But we went into, in the larger conversation was about Leonardo, the company that makes something that can go over Flock cameras, which I believe is already probably happening, my opinion. But I'm almost willing to bet anything that it will be happening soon. And these are things that are made to go on Flock cameras that turn them into things that absorb Wi-Fi and your text messages and everything. And that's a group called Leonardo making something called Signal Trace. And my God, are those things just packed to the hilt with Israeli intelligence. There's also a group called SITE, capital letters, SITE, which is sort of a tangential, other kind of a scooping up of intelligence. Watch the whole show. We go through many of them. And they're literally just scooping up information, and it's just Israel intelligence, guys. Now, that's building on that point. I want to talk about this. Oh, actually, first, I forgot I included this. Somebody emailed me this today, and they didn't say whether they wanted their name to be included, so I'm not going to say. But it's a positive note, guys, because we just talked about this. Derek's discussion, Mexican government delays biometric registration because of massive pushback. Now, who's to say it's going to stop forever? But they did this. They, as a community, as a society of Mexico, had enough pushback to where they were forced to delay it at the very least. That's a win, even if momentary. So in this case, here's an example of somebody who's in our community, who's been reaching out to us about this kind of stuff, he's been fighting one of these things. Reached out and said, hey guys, well, we just beat the data center, at least for now. Now it's about staying on top of rezoning requests and any other crap they might try to use to shoehorn in another one. Now, this is the point: is it never stops. They will circumvent, they will readjust, they'll find a new location, they'll try to find, it's just what they do. And so we have to, if we care about this stuff, it has to be an all the time thing. We have to fight, whether that's through legislation, whether protesting, whatever it is, stand up and continue to pay attention to what they do. Persistence pays off, he says. Here's what I recommend to everyone do. It's her actually, but it says join every local Facebook group for your town and country. Now, I don't like Facebook, but this is about community. Whether Facebook or something else, find that community. They're out there, guys. I argue Facebook is actually probably censoring most of these like they do. It's sort of a setup because remember, like even the keto thing, weirdly, right before COVID-19, remember that massive attack on all the health-focused things on Facebook? I think there's a reason for that. But so the point is they'll just pull the rug when they want to. But wherever you find it, guys, start communities everywhere. Come join the one we're going to make in Tennessee. Join. Watch for meeting announcements and agendas. Share upcoming meetings so more people show up. Pass out flyers. We were just doing that at the farmers market about the event. Set up tables at events, drive awareness. Go to commission and planning meetings whenever you can. I keep trying to get myself to do that, and just every day the work here takes over everything. I want to find a way to get more active in this kind of stuff in the community. And you know what? Maybe there's somebody out there in my local area, maybe Tennessee, in the greater Nashville area. Maybe you're out there and you want to do that. Maybe you want to do it for TLAV. Reach out to me. Because who's to say if that actually happens, but I want to find a way to get somebody who's there. The videos we see of the guy who's up there pestering him. I want that. I want that to be happening every day for everything that we don't agree with, because they're so used to people just letting it happen. And even if it doesn't stop, at least we can get some stuff in their face, call it out, get the community to see that there's somebody out there fighting for them. Ask questions, make them answer them publicly. Email your commissioners so your concerns are on the record. That's a good point. Even if they don't respond, even if they don't care. Pay attention to rezoning requests, comprehensive plan amendments, industrial projects, utility upgrades, substations, transmission lines, and anything that seems out of place. Don't wait until a project is announced. By then, they're already they're way down the road. Now, I argue, don't do anything illegal. Don't do something that will give them an excuse to go after you. But they're already framing just awareness of this stuff as terrorism. My point is, get awareness to it, get enough momentum in the community, push back, because you have a right to do so. It's your community. These things affect your lives. It's then what they're even doing doesn't even give you benefit, despite what they say. Don't wait until it's announced. It says, I also recently requested that the county hold a public workshop on data centers so residents and commissioners can learn about the potential impacts before another project ever comes along. And it's worth considering that maybe these people in local government just don't even know. But it says the biggest lesson I've learned is this: don't assume someone else is paying attention. Get involved, stay involved, keep showing up. That's how communities protect themselves. Damn right. Well said. Now, to get into that conversation, I just thought this was interesting. This weird account that seems to have very little following, yet seems to have almost an outsized presence on this platform, commenting under everybody that comments about them. It's very weird. They put this out saying, what does it look like when an agency gets it right? Flock Forward 2026 answers that question with sessions led by law enforcement professionals, sharing the exact playbooks and, basically saying, we're doing everything right. Fact check. Twitter, it says Flock systems are routinely abused. Flock TOS changes gave them more ownership of the data, which we'll get into. That's not just, that's criminal, in my opinion. What they're saying is that they say, we'll never take your data. How often do we make that point? Then what do? Delete the line that says that they have to keep it secret. Seriously. And they steal your data, sell it to the government, sell it to Palantir or whatever. It wouldn't go to Palantir, but sell it to anybody who wants to buy it. Palantir already has access to all of that. Police are often using Flock to stalk love interests, which is very real. There's links to all of these. Flock systems will soon listen to speech. It's already happening. Flock shares data without permission and in violation of state laws. Think about how the fact that even Twitter can just break that down. And this is still happening anyway. How do you not see that? Shows you our government doesn't even care what we think. Left or right, it doesn't seem to matter. Oh, and then, as Steve was showing us, they just black out the comments on most of these. Very little engagement, and just why? Because nobody supports this. Other than the Benny Johnsons of the world. It's true. The left and the right version of those clowns, that they support it. Because they're not real, in my opinion. Now, Dissident Rexy. I was going to go to this one next, actually, but yeah, that's right. Dissident Rexy says, weird. What license plate are they reading at the playground and the basketball court? Just to make it clear, guys, these are very much going all over that are not just license plate readers, but you know this by now. This is the Nikita. This is the Twitter guy, right? This weird Twitter guy that like is being called out across the board. A lot of people think he's an Israeli asset. I forgot this was where this from. That's perfect. Here, so Steve posted this. Can catch kidnappers and murderers. That's Flock, right? And then it says Flock cameras still present a variety of issues. They're getting called out everywhere. And Steve says Flock's social media team is desperately trying to figure out how to disable community notes and restrict the comments. And it says they have a 2.8 success rate at finding criminals. Nikita Bear says this whole meme about Flock being bad was likely started by foreign adversaries. What a lazy effort. You might as well have just said it was, you clown, because likely, I mean, you're assuming Steve is clearly not a foreign adversary. Nobody, the reality is in this comment, everybody beneath him was like, I mean, Steve did his own part of this. You could show tons of comments beneath him that are clearly even verified in this country. They're just hiding from this. And that shows you Twitter has an interest in covering this up. At least he does. He says, it isn't the first time narratives to destroy American municipal infrastructure. That's what you're calling this? American municipal infrastructure? Crazy that something as benign as license plate readers has been turned into the boogeyman. Guys, this is how alarming this is. This is not even debatable. This is so far and obviously beyond license plate readers. And yet here he is a couple of days ago trying to gaslight you into thinking that's not the case. How alarming is that? And that's what he pointed out. Clearly, that's not about license plates. Now, we're going to get into some stuff that'll probably unnerve you if you haven't heard this by now. But this is Justin saying, saw a new Flock camera today, and it just points into a Motel 6 parking lot. What are they really doing with this? Is all we're asking. It's not about what we think. Shadow of Ezra posted this. And so in Oregon, there was already one example of Flock cameras being forced to be removed, showing you that you can have this momentum. And locally is where you're going to get this done. So we'll start with this one.
It was a short run for Flock safety cameras in the city of Woodburn. In 2025, a total of 23 cameras were installed across the city to help police track down suspect vehicles. And while police say the cameras help solve dozens of crimes, community members raised concerns that the system could allow federal agencies to access its data.
Flock security cameras that are present in Woodburn contribute to the terrorizing of our community.
City Council in November suspended the use of the cameras while the police department conducted a full review. That report confirmed what many people were afraid of, that federal agencies had accessed the system, showing nearly 6,100 searches on the city's camera network between January and November 2025. However, that number is just 0.18% of the more than 3 million total searches. And the police department says none of the searches conducted by federal agencies targeted Woodburn exclusively. The city's cameras were included in system-wide searches, contrary to city policy. According to the report, a temporary Flock safety trial is what allowed federal agencies to run broad safety searches across several camera networks at once.
Oh, so some kind of an anomaly, some kind of weird sidestep, a loophole. What do you know? So this is a point we make every time. It's like, who's to say whether that was planned or not? Should they want to, these people, power structure, will always find a reason to just turn around and ignore exactly what they swore was the only thing they cared about. So the point is they accessed it, they used it, and that's current administration. I argue Biden would have done the exact same thing, or whoever was in power. The point is that clearly they're abusing the system, and that's over. I argue this is overlapping with ICE. Now, I can't prove it's this exact example. What I'm going to get into is the biometric side of this, which is overlapping with ICE. But I mean, are we really going to pretend like they're not utilizing every one of the things they have to go after who they think are their enemies? That's an opinion, but look around.
Including Woodburn's. That trial, however, appeared to have ended around June 24th, when Woodburn police say federal agency searches stopped. While Woodburn police say the cameras were used in more than 350 investigations and led to arrests, stolen vehicle recoveries, and drug seizures, concerns over the technology ultimately brought the program to an end.
Right. So even local media is like, framing it as, oh, that's too bad because it was working. No, the reality is the people in the community, did not want it. And they already violated the law. They already demonstrated that they'll break the rules when they want to. And so now you have a certain, think about the way that works. You have a local database system and a surveillance dynamic that's tied into some kind of, whether it's a fusion center or just some kind of whatever it becomes, some kind of massive one nation kind of database. And the point is you have this what's the right word for it? Like there's not revolving door, but just if there's no block, the federal government can step in and access anything they want anytime, which to some people seems like you probably already think that's the case. And maybe it is, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. Your privacy is supposed to matter, right? Your rights are supposed to matter, even though, we know that's not what these people think. But if they're still arguing that they stand and enforce the Constitution and believe in your inalienable rights, then we have to hold them to that. And the truth is that every single day they show you that they do not care about any of those things. This one shows you that there are some people out there, whether it's opportunism or not, in local positions or anywhere else, that will fight for you if you have the momentum. Now, who's to say that maybe this guy stood up because he's in the position because he cares? Local government, in my opinion, is the only place you're going to find something like that. But I can also consider that maybe he just recognized that nobody supported it, and so he wanted the support of the community. Either way, my point is, it's a win, and this is what we have to do.
The end game of this company is not to provide us license plate readers.
And then the volume is low on this one. Turn it up. Listen to what he's saying. So not only are they going to ultimately show you that they're canceling these contracts, these are government entities telling you that it's all a ruse, that what they're doing is not about license plates, but something much more nefarious. Local government telling you that.
The end game of this company is not to provide us license plate readers. The end game of this company is to be able to collect as much data as they can and then eventually turn around and sell it to customers and companies. They now had
which is what they did, right? Or at least, even the government has access to it. But the idea that this is not this, protected database of your private information, they always claim. It will be sold. It will be accessed by the government. It always is. And that's what he's telling you.
A perpetual right to use customer data to quote unquote support and improve it to customers and companies. They now added a perpetual right to use customer data to quote unquote support and improve their services.
Oh, the perpetual right. So they've added to it after the fact that they now suddenly have the perpetual right in perpetuity to access that for your benefit. It's like every other terms of service in anything you've ever used. It's just, they will mission creep it down the road. It was always about this.
Even after we end the contract, they still have data from every car that would go through Milford. Even though they said specifically they would delete it for 30 days.
Yep. Right. Everyone keeps saying that. They said they deleted after every 30 days. They did not.
Now also say, but they have a perpetual license for it. The two are in conflict. They also had a specific line saying, Flock does not own and shall not sell customer data. They removed that line from their terms and conditions in February of this year.
They removed the line. Now, is that not a criminal act? So you make a contract and you just arbitrarily, because they don't care about upholding. They know that this is a larger agenda. That's my opinion. I'm not going to speak to what they're thinking and feeling. The point is that from my opinion about how this is going, why somebody would choose to randomly delete information from a signed contract is because they know they're not going to be held accountable for it. That's my opinion. But why would they risk having some kind of legal problem? To me, this goes well beyond one location. This is a national agenda.
And I wasn't on board with these in the beginning, and the more I learn about it, the more I don't like it.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Aye.
So, see, there's an example of a local area, and that's a win, guys. They won. Now, given they had the support of the local government, which is a huge benefit, but it is happening. Orwell Day shared that. Now, again, this is Derek's article, which I highly recommend you read if you haven't yet. This has to do with the CURP Biometric system. It's basically like a social security number, but with a number, but then with irises and face scans and the QR code to your personality. It is everything we're fighting. It's happening all over the world, and people push back, and it's at the very least delayed. Tree Strew Media They just put out something new, by the way. Make sure you check out their account. It says, does anyone really believe that a privacy and freedom murdering Orwellian hellscape that turns us into food for machines is being erected around us for our safety? Really? As Tim Sharp highlights, Nancy Guthrie, that story that was, who even knows, was kidnapped from her home over 4 months ago. So the story goes, seems like all of the flock cameras in Tucson would have brought her back by now, unless flock isn't about solving crimes. Look at all the cameras in Tucson. Here, just by the way, is the current map. Cameras in view in all of the United States, 107,933. Look at that map, guys. This is not even something Americans voted on. This just happens. It's not, your government is not even in control, it feels like. But if they are, they do not care about your rights, your concerns. Most Americans have been pushing back on stuff like this our entire lives. It's the equivalent of them going, we're going to stop FISA 702, and then basically switching and saying, we have to do it for your safety. And look at how bad Democrats are trying to stop it. How do you even make sense of that, guys? You make sense of it by realizing they will shamelessly fight for anything that gives them power over your life. That's what that looks like right there. That's terrifying. Now, Murray Rothbard, writes, the state has no natural right to catalog the daily movements of peaceful people, which is, by the way, why they lie about what it is, but we know that's what it is. Its only legitimate role is to answer to the people it claims to serve. That's in a world where they actually are what they're supposed to be. Flock can't, in a world where they actually are what they're supposed to be within a constitutionally bound statist world, I guess. The idea that we live in this country with this constitution and a statist society. That's the way it's supposed to work. Meaning that I would love to see us in a world where none of that had to be the reality, where government didn't even have to exist. But it says flock cameras don't make government more accountable. They make citizens more accountable to government. That's exactly backwards. The truth. Now, I played that clip just the other day of the guy telling you this is what it's doing. It's inverting the reality. Now, I have to come and prove to you that I'm not the guy on that video, as opposed to being innocent until proven guilty. And that keeps happening. Their success rate is very low. Now, this is the article we started with. U.S. Army begins fielding next generation battlefield biometric system. Now, thinking about all the different weird connections, which you could find many of them, whether through the Army, through the government itself, through multiple aspects of the biometric technological side of this, that Israel is involved with all of this. But that's not even the point for this focus, but just realizing that matters with everything we're getting into. But this is what your government is now doing, June 26th. It's the next step of this. It's already been there. But when did we ever decide that we were going to be scanning biometric? You know how long Americans have been criticizing what China does, and they've been using your fear of that to push back against China, and they've been building the whole thing the entire time. A lot of us have been pointing that out. The U.S. Army has begun fielding a new multimodal, so just multi-directional, multi-use biometric collection system designed to give military police and other forces, that includes ICE, faster access to identity information in tactical environments, which, by the way, is what Trump's administration is framing right now in this country. Battlefield America. Like there's previous documents from our government that show you they planned for Americans being their enemy. It's not secret. And so the point is now, as Biden told you, that, who is a terrorist. And well, what's funny is, grab this for you real quick. Hold on. Come on, man. Why wouldn't this not pop up? There it is. Originally posted on the Last American Vagabond. Who is a terrorist in Biden's America? Whitney wrote this for TLAV in 2021. Now, as I've said before, you could easily change this to who's a terrorist in Trump's America, and it would be, save for a few minor changes, the exact same conversation. Now, this is the point, though, is that what we're talking about is turning this into the reality, right? So now, just simply by, you are suddenly a terrorist by simply being against all of this. But tactical environments is what they're claiming is happening in this country with Antifa, or on the other side of it, the MAGA terrorists, whichever you saw, however they want to play it. Both sides are illegitimate, illusory things based on some level of truth. And the reality now is that now you are the enemy, right? So this is, just to be clear, they're not just talking about some overseas thing. That's home now. Tactical environments are here. And it says starting with a first unit equipped event in May for the North Dakota Army National Guard Police Battalion. Oh, right. So the National Guard Police Battalion, like the ones that are being used in all these little hotspots across the country to enforce ICE stuff. Yeah. Yes. NXGBCC. it's what's the acronym for it, I guess. It's right here. It's the Next Generation Biometric Collection Capability. Collects fingerprints, iris scans, facial images, and voice samples, allowing soldiers or whoever's utilizing it to submit biometric data and receive identity information in near real time. So that's what we're already seeing ICE use, in my opinion, at least some version of the previous example, if not already this, of basically just scanning people and getting information back. Now, it says the Army said the system reached initial operational capability on May 28th, less than 2 weeks after the 131st Military Police Battalion training event. So only just hearing about it now, I guess. But additionally, just being able to scan and access information on you, it's also about how that then gets stored, used, and where it goes in the future. Accessing everybody's biometric information is going to be paramount to what they're building. The program's next step are already scheduled. Next steps already are scheduled. The Army lists new equipment training throughout fiscal 2026 and projects award of a biometric production and sustainment contract in the third quarter of this fiscal year, which ends in June 30th. So it's all building out right now. And don't forget, that's the 5G rollout. You couldn't have done this without Trump's 5G rollout under the guise of COVID-19. See if I think I have that right here. Saved for this because I remember the interesting time. This was the show we got censored for big time. Right here. I'll see if my site's working right now. Okay, good. It came up. Looks like it's running faster now. Trump quietly signs 5G law under the cover of coronavirus. Now, we got censored for this because they were claiming something that wasn't the truth. But either way, we went over 100,000 subscribers. This video itself was well over 1 million views. 1 million. Think about that. Imagine what we would be like today if they hadn't suppressed us at the peak of our rise, right? Of the idea of during all of this, when everybody was looking to our conversation, and we got shut down from everything. PayPal, Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, boom, just like that. But it's not a new story. You guys all know that. But anyway, we keep going. The point is, none of this would even be possible if that hadn't happened, whether it was Biden or Trump or anybody else. But that's where this all happened, and everybody was distracted. The new capability is intended to consolidate and modernize those missions while adding voice as a biometric modality alongside fingerprints, iris scans, and facial images. Army officials described this new next-generation platform as the first Army biometric collection capability built as software rather than a system tied to specialized proprietary hardware that must be separately sustained. So, you could read that a few different ways, but I simply argue that not only is it going to be more accessible and used on the fly, but it's also that they real-time response, but as it says, that software rather than some kind of hardware separately sustained with some kind of database, or I would even argue managed by some secondary thing. This is just tapped into the system. This is the government. This is the military. That approach will allow the Army to operate the capability through a mix of mobile devices and laptop-centered kits for static operations rather than relying on single legacy collection platforms, right? So it's not just some one database somewhere. It's just this is where you get with this kind of real-time flowing of information. But for me, it's more so on top of it all about what they will ultimately do with all of that. But why is this okay with anybody? Now, this is being framed for the military, but it is being applied to the average people. Look at the new identification discussion, the digital ID push. According to its program description, the capability is intended to help commanders or whoever's using them identify combatants and persons of interest, manage enemy prisoners of war and civilian detainees, assist with, that's such a weird thing to include too, assist with displaced persons and refugee processing. So how often do they process refugees in other countries as our military? Just be clear. It's obvious this is about local stuff as well. And support access control and intelligence missions during large-scale combat operations, whether that's aimed at Americans in the United States or not. The system is part of a broader military identity data architecture centered on the Department of Defense Automated Biometric Identification System, the ABIS. So the point is that this has been used, but this is the next generation. This is the bigger step into utilizing this as a real, I argue what we're going to see from this will become the ubiquitous all the time kind of biometric dynamic. Whether it's in a year, it's hard to say how this goes forward with the pushback. Hopefully we push back enough that we slow something like this down. But we're already seeing this stuff, guys. People using, I mean, we're complying. People are complying, using it to sign into their phones. Stop complying with that stuff. But this is where it's going. And hopefully I made it clear that every one of these things are completely riddled with, influence from the wrong people. Oh, I left this open, it looks like. Oh, please tell me I saved these. Okay, good. For a second, I thought I forgot to save the tabs. All right. Including this one as well. So here is the State Department doc from DHS. Privacy Impact Assessment Update. Oh, because they really care about your privacy, don't they? Look, July 2012, excuse me. Eagle. So this is about ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So, as ICE has established a new subsystem within the Enforcement Integrated Database called EID Arrest Grade for Law Enforcement, or EAGLE. EAGLE is a booking application used by ICE law enforcement to process the biometric and biographic information of the individuals arrested, not criminals, not people that even necessarily end up being charged, but just arrested, anybody they pick up, and tons of them have been released because they have nothing to go on. The point, Eagle will also forge a new connection in 2012 to the Department of Defense's automated biographic information system. So like I said, that existed before. Now they are shoving it into the next generation. And so what I'm highlighting is that ICE was already using this, and so whatever next step they get, ICE will gain as well. I don't think I need to make that clear of a point, but just in case you were, because the point is ICE has already demonstrated this utilization. It's already clear. And even the talk about refugees makes that all very clear as well. But here it is. So to talk about the just wildly unjust charges that just came down on people they claim are Antifa terrorists. Even if they were guilty of every single thing they claimed, the amount of time they handed out is insulting to anybody who believes in what they pretend this country is. So Ken Klippenstein wrote this article. I want to read this first. Minnesota Antifa terrorist charge. Now, again, to start with this point, as I've made clear many times talking about this, the idea of how this has been used, like Antifa, in my opinion, and I'm sure people disagree, is a construct that is manipulated by the government. That's not to say that who's to say where it started? Maybe there was a core group or net people just kind of it's like I am anonymous. People just call themselves Antifa. It's hard to say. But I think regardless of how it started, it's been used by the government. People come out in their black bloc stuff and they break windows and it gets blamed. Same thing happens in everything we see around the world. Israel does it. They've done it in Ukraine, US or Israel, and Syria. They do it. This is what they do, guys. So who's to say? I think that average people come out like that and do their own things too. But understand that this is basically what's being manipulated by like the Elon Musk Trump side of this is somewhat true. The idea that it is something the government uses to manipulate. But I argue they do it too. And both sides play the same game. And I don't mean both sides like they use Antifa. I think they all together as one thing use whatever group they can, a Patriot Front and Antifa, in order to manipulate us into certain positions. You could disagree with that. It's my opinion. There's plenty of provable evidence to certain parts of that. But overall, you can decide. But what I'm saying that for is to highlight that there is some truth to how it's used. But when they only make it about that and the Democrats are using it against us, it's a carve-out. It's a cartoon. It's all of them using it against all of us, not the government versus itself, in my opinion anyway. So that being said, the point is that as they arrest these people and call them Antifa, even if you believe the argument that Antifa is some, Democrat, it's what they're doing is abusing that, even if it's real to you, to manipulate this to go after anybody who they want to use this against. And it will be abused the same way when Democrats get into power and they use it right back. And it's like, it's this same old teeter-totter. And then that gives that side to use the excuse of, say, we told you that's what they were. It's like, well, people like us are going, yes, we agree with both of you. You just seem to not be able to see it on your side of the government. People who pay attention to it all can see that both sides do the same things. Now, the point here, and you can make the same argument, like I said, about Patriot Front or any number of these groups where there are real people that exist in any number of these things, but you can easily prove the kind of government connection to these things that tie right back to the Azov movement and the larger Operation Aerodynamic and the things they've been using for decades. But I digress. The point on this, As Ken writes, federal prosecutor can't explain why or who Antifa is. And we've already seen this in front of Congress, sitting there being unable to say where their location is, where their headquarters is, who's in charge, like basic things. So if you're going to claim this is a group and this is a terrorist group that we're trying, what are we talking about, right? Give me some kind of actionable points. It just becomes a nebulous idea of whoever shares these ideas. Now that obviously is completely counterintuitive to American ideas in any sense. You're allowed to think what you want. You're allowed to believe what you want. The moment you act on something that's a crime, that's when something happens. What the right is doing through this, even if you agree with these people being terrorists, is exactly what you were calling out about the left. Saying you're not allowed to wear that red hat. We believe you're wink, wink, and Nazi. We think you're, this is what we keep seeing. So now they've turned it around to, if you believe the government's a bad thing, if you believe they're committing genocide, or you take something specific, if you believe that they're, what's one of the terms, if they're anti-capitalist, even though that's a whole story too, with both sides. Ron Paul just called both sides of the government socialist, by the way. But then ultimately they can then say, we argue you're a terrorist. And then they couch it on Antifa, and you get far too many Republicans who go, yay, bad Antifa, even though you're just a person who called out the genocide or whatever else. So here, he writes this. Last week's federal indictment, and this was put out on the 23rd, federal indictment of 15 anti-ICE protesters in Minnesota as alleged Antifa members and thus domestic terrorists is a masterclass in how the FBI is now practicing pre-crime, arresting normal citizens before they commit a crime or without regard to whether they've committed a crime at all, which is where we're going to get into. Because the reality of these people getting 50 years, somebody who wasn't even at the protest, many of them were at the protest. They don't even actually know these other people outside of some loose connection of chats and things they do together at protests. And then weren't even involved with anything that happened and ultimately get called, you get 50 years because you were there when they did this and this guy shot at somebody. Now, we've talked about this event at the FBI headquarters for many months. And what did I tell you? I mean, literally how this ended is almost exactly what I predicted, save for the guy who shot sort of disappearing, because I sensed that maybe this guy would, maybe he's part of the agenda. But if you remember, what you saw, what you had was a protest at the ICE facility. They weren't all part of like one unit group. They were all the bunch of people there protesting in the different groups. And the guy, whatever reason, ultimately took a shot, and I think it was hit the police officer in like the shoulder or the neck, but he survived. And that guy should get charged for that. That's a crime, guys. No matter what your justification is, you just shot somebody. That's a crime. What happened, though, is that you remember Kash Patel stood up and said, we arrested them and they're all terrorists. They're part of a group. They lied like they did about every other story, as we'll get into. Like Garcia or Khalil, they just made up this crazy story, pushed it all, even though it's rooted in somebody who did shoot at somebody, and then tried to go after all of them as like domestic terrorists. And on what I say at the time, when you looked into it barely, you said, well, look, this one guy seems to be the focal point, and all the rest of them are being just kind of tagged onto it because they were present. And because they argue that they have left-leaning ideas. And here we are, where all of them have been arrested. Now, other than all of them getting charged, which I argue is going to be turned over, the one guy was the one guy who got shot, or who did shoot, is the only person who, in my opinion, actually broke the law. Now, we'll get into it all, because there's different opinions about whether they were conspiring to do something. And it basically ends up being because you make that lens and say there was a plan to go after them, even though you can't prove that. The reality of it is clearly that they were there as a part of a protest against the government that they believed was breaking the law. You know why? Because they were. Now, anyway, we'll come back to that. Last week's federal indictment, 15 anti-ICE protesters in Minnesota as alleged Antifa members. A masterclass in FBI practicing pre-crime, something that Whitney and myself and Derek and a lot of us have been talking about for a long time. And it goes well beyond left and right. As she pointed out, Bill Barr was the one that really pushed this forward. And what do you know? Here's Trump making it a reality using something you hate. National Security Presidential Memorandum 7 is where a lot of this came out, and this is on top of his other agendas. The directive, Rosen also said, directs federal investigators to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt those who engage in political violence and intimidation. So political violence to them ultimately means yelling the word that mean you might do something. Nope, that's not the left talking, guys. That's Trump's administration. Rosen was asked at the press conference how the Justice Department defines Antifa, and he basically had no answer. Here's what he said. What Antifa is goes beyond, I think, the scope of what the indictment is. He says, but what I can tell you is that we have plenty of people that self-identify in that way. And you might want to ask them that question. I mean, he basically admits to you that so somebody says they're Antifa, therefore that's a criminal act. Now you can charge them for being a terrorist. So somebody says I'm ISIS, now suddenly they are provably in court ISIS? I mean, it's just, this is a bastardization of everything we ever thought was what this country holds sacred. And I'm talking about this entire administration and just where the government's going, not just Trump. But this example, guys, the idea that, I mean, there are an outline of our rights for a reason, and this violates every one of them. Like, I mean, not just this one point, but what they're doing, whether it's about your search and seizure, whether it's about your right to speak, or whether you go down the list of the general ideas that we all know. Most Americans don't even know the full breadth of these things, but the basics. And every single one of them are being challenged in the same way the left was doing, but it's because you agree with the point in some cases. But again, I argue most conservatives are very well aware of this right now. What he says. And as to whether anyone was actually hurt, here too Rosen stumbled. And now this is about this isn't just that one example, but it says whether or not they actually, at the end of the day, and this is about the many of them that did not cause harm to anybody, whether or not they did at the end of the day cause bodily harm is not the measure of whether or not they committed a serious federal crime. Now, that would be fair if you're talking about something that was a federal crime that didn't involve violence, but you see it's all hinging around the act of that shooting. And it says it sounds like a kid who hadn't done the homework being called on in class. In other words, the federal government is prosecuting a group it cannot even define. The Trump administration's war on its opponents finds its solid form in the war on Antifa. Because President Trump designated Antifa as a terrorist group, counterterrorism rules apply. And this is what they've done with everything. Remember when they'd made it an invasion, and somehow at the same time you were, Biden, I mean, they tried to overlap all these agendas, and suddenly there was like an organized invasion of Venezuela. What happened to that? Did that just stop being talked about? Yes, because it wasn't real. And ultimately, all they did was use that to justify the actions that they needed to take that would circumvent rights, that would ignore the Constitution, that would ignore U.S. law. And they did national security. Always. Think of the modern day FBI objective as preventing another 9/11. It says that is following the doctrine of the past 2 decades, which is to stop an attack before it happened. That's pre-crime. Though they don't say it explicitly, Task Force Vanguard is in the business of pre-crime. Under the Memorandum 7, the feds require no crime to actually have been committed. They only need indicators. The indicators are broad enough to sweep in millions of Americans, which this is the same thing we've said for years about the U.S. system in general, is that literally, I mean, I've heard lawyers say this my whole life. Anybody right now could be charged probably with 3 felonies, anybody. Because of how long the system goes and how many arbitrary laws are on the books. And so the case is, these indicators now, they can just argue, well, anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, extremism on migration. The point is suddenly you become a terrorist because you think a certain way. And then it becomes, well, he said free Palestine, so therefore that's what he actually means. So it's an extension on top of that or whatever else. The idea of a red hat being a Nazi or whatever you want to call it, guys, that's the same idea. So if you called it out, if you're being called a Nazi because you believe in the trucker convoy, you should call it out when they say believing the genocide's happening makes you a terrorist, or being against capitalism makes you a terrorist, or being against Christianity. Because you can be against whatever you want. If you go out and bomb a building because of it, then you're a criminal. If you go out and attack a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew because of it, then you're a criminal. I thought we all used to agree on this stuff, right? But it says Antifa as an indicator is absurd. Saying basically because you say you're Antifa, therefore now you're a terrorist. That was what we were saying. At protests, he says, I've covered over the past couple of years when I asked people what they thought of Antifa. The answer I heard, I forget if I said, I think I did. It's Ken Klippenstein. You can see it on the show for the podcast. This is Ken's Substack. He said he heard again and again when he asked people this, from moms, grandpas, weirdly by a quick little overlap, sort of like we saw on January 6th. Moms and grandpas and old women and men, people meandering. Yes, because that's almost always what this comes down to. And then you had the Ray-Eps that were there, just like you probably have the Ray-Eps of the world in this conversation too, guys. Stand back and stop falling for the partisan manipulation. Goes on to say, ask them, ask them what he thought of Antifa. And what he got again and again from everybody was, I am Antifa. Some of the protesters were being playful. Some were being defiant. But what they didn't mean, in his opinion, but I agree in a large sense, if this is how people, when you get into the deeper conversation, was that they did not mean they were part of some organization as Washington imagines it. When I asked them why Antifa, the answer was universal. They're anti-fascist, which is non-national security terms is what they thought the word simply meant. Now, you all know, no matter what you put the scale, that is some of it. There are people that just believe, even though, as I've often pointed out, Antifa is not an anti-fascist group as an entity, like as a general sentiment of what I've seen. Even if you believe what I would argue, just making it more about like the left-leaning perspective on it. Because I agree, I don't think this is outside of the government use of it. It's a nebulous thing. My point, though, is that a lot of the left-leaning groups that act in that name go out there and do things that I argue are fascist in and of their own right. So it's kind of an interesting oxymoron. But either way, them saying I am because they believe what Trump's doing is fascism does not make them a terrorist. And it says that confusion has produced mishaps that would be funny if the stakes weren't what they were, what they are. Like the time federal law enforcement was convinced it had identified the leader of Antifa, who turned out to be some random guy in Portland, and you can read about it right there. And it says, today, U.S. Attorney Rosen said, today, federal indictment was unsealed, charging 15 defendants with conspiracy to impede or injure federal officers and other charges related to efforts in 2 Minneapolis-based Antifa groups that violently oppose the enforcement. So you have one guy who shot, the rest of them suddenly become guilty by association. In many cases, weren't even associated with this guy. Conspiracy to impede. So now the conspiracy is to just maybe try to stop what they're doing. Guys, I just don't know how anybody honest, if you believe in the Constitution, whatever you think of these people, even if everything they're doing is exactly what Trump is saying, that you can agree with any of this. It's flimsy on its face. And maybe it's because you've been built into this idea that this is some secret thing that Democrats are using just beneath the surface. And so this is you getting them, even though the law is not there. But we know it's really there. Even if that's the truth, you're still doing what you think you're fighting, what you were fighting. If you don't have the evidence, then find it. To allow them to do this, even if it's really what they are, is only giving the government the understanding and the ability to then circumvent that anywhere else they want. We all know this somewhere inside. The defendants are members and where was I actually? It says, the defendants are members and associates of Direct Action Minnesota, which is simply a group that's fighting for Minnesota, who is basically has a left-leaning perspective, as I understand it, and is standing up against ICE and everything else they're doing. Not a terrorist organization. It's a protest group. And it says these defendants have been charged not for what they said, but for what they did. Oh, that's an interesting statement, seeing as how most of them didn't do anything other than protest. And it says these defendants, they all joined an agreement, a conspiracy to interfere with lawful immigration enforcement operations. And you get 100 years, 50 years, 30 years for interfering with law enforcement operations. Now it says conspiracy sounds to me, Ken writes, an awful lot like a civil disobedience sounds awful like civil disobedience and free speech. Now, could you just flip it around? Put yourself in the same situation. You're at a MAGA protest. One guy shoots at something, and then Biden goes after all of you. Doesn't that feel familiar? And suddenly starts arresting everybody for conspiracy to go after the government. And ultimately, all you did was simply stand in between a couple of ropes. I know honest people can see the parallel. So it goes, note, for instance, he says that the most vivid piece of evidence Rosen actually presented to reporters was a video of one defendant, Kyle Wagner, using violent speech, which sits awkwardly beside Rosen's insistence that nobody was being charged for what they said. Right? The action isn't, so basically they're saying what they said shows you they were there because of this intent. So there is no action then, you're even saying. But it says the Memorandum 7 was signed in September 2025, 3 days after Trump's executive order designating Antifa as domestic terrorist organization. It directs the government to disrupt networks supposedly animated by beliefs that include anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, and extremism on migration. I mean, so you're talking about the belief. So whether, there's not even a crime happening. It's the idea that you argue because of what they are, they're eventually going to commit crimes, and that because they believe these things, then we know it for sure. Not only is that so obviously low, like the lowest, that is rife for manipulation, and we know it. It's also it's also a violation of the rights. And it's also probably not even true, based on what we see happening. Attorney General Pam Bondi's implementation memo, titled Ending Political Violence Against ICE, pointed that apparatus squarely at people accused of impeding immigration enforcement. Even though they put in their extremism on migration, like the point simply becomes, that's how they frame, that's what they really meant. If you simply don't agree with what our agenda is, excuse me, in stopping these operations, and realize many of them were flatly illegal. for tons of reasons. And so that would make it almost, now I'm not talking about engaging in punching or acting violently, but just simply protesting and saying, you can't do this. You can't take that person while standing in your way because what you're doing is violent and wrong and breaking the law. And they call that terrorism. But either way, the bottom line is we see with Good, or, Renee Good or Preddy, like the reality of what actually led to and then lied about the entire thing. I don't think most people are confused about what this is. Joint Task Force Vanguard is now the enforcement arm with a much broader target. I mean, just watch. For those that still somehow think this is justified and honest, just watch as it inverts and is pointed at you the next time. In January, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, by the way, both of them, Noem and Bondi, still in the government. How in the hell that even makes sense? Proudly announced that ICE had survived an attempted murder of federal law enforcement in North Minneapolis, suggesting protesters were directly threatening the law enforcement officers. What she described as federal officers were ambushed and attacked by 3 individuals who beat them with snow shovels and the handles of the brooms. We've talked about this, forcing one officer to fire a defensive shot, ending up being 2 Venezuelan DoorDash drivers with no violent records. Then the video surfaced. And of course, if you remember, the surveillance footage from the city showed a scuffle lasting about 12 seconds. No snow shovel beating. A shovel sat in the ground the entire time, didn't even get picked up. So, Mike, you could, I don't need to get into all of again. Endless examples like this. Endless. I mean, I've 20 I've pulled off on my own coverage where they lie about, opening fire on a car of a family and then later lie about how they hit them with the car and it comes out they didn't even get close. They're just dishonest people. And they know they've got the backing of a dishonest government and they went to town. Authorities had the footage within hours of the shooting. Prosecutors didn't bother to watch it until weeks after they'd charged the men and put an agent's sworn account in front of a judge. In February, Rosen's own office moved to dismiss the charges with prejudice, meaning they can't go after them again, citing evidence materially inconsistent with the affidavit, meaning they were lying. A federal judge agreed 2 ICE agents were placed on administrative leave for apparently lying under oath. That's one example, but it's over and over. And we're supposed to pretend like these people aren't acting illegally? This was not a one-off. The local CBS affiliate in Minneapolis combed through court filings and found at least 18 Minnesotans whose assault on an officer cases were dropped, with a judge dismissing them for 15 of them. And go through it as we did on the show, probably one at a time as they were happening. These weren't all Democrat judges. Just as many of them were Republican judges or a mix, depending on where it ended up in court. And that's easy to see, guys. The sworn affidavits of a single ICE agent turned up in roughly 10 of the dismissed cases. See, there's a thread here. In one case, Rosen himself moved to drop charges. The defendant said federal agents had shackled him to a hospital bed for days without access to his phone. Insane. And the pattern isn't confined, so covering up things they did. Or, there's examples of ICE agents stealing the cars of people they deported and getting caught. Rampant lawlessness. And the pattern isn't confined to Minnesota. In Chicago's Operation Midway Blitz, prosecutors charged with the Broadview Six, a group that included a Democratic congressional candidate and a Democratic candidate for the state legislature, with conspiring to impede an ICE officer outside a detention facility. A federal judge tossed the case over prosecutorial misconduct, including allegations of jury tampering, misleading the court. So probably knowing they're lying and then trying to force or manipulate the court into getting what they want. It just doesn't stop. Of 22 prosecutions in the Chicago area under the federal impeding an officer statute, 16 out of 22 had been dismissed and never reached an indictment, according to a Chicago Sun-Times tally. Now, like I said, in the peak of this, that's not to say there's not people at these protests who act out and break the law. And if they do, and you charge them with a crime, there's nobody should be criticizing that. It's about the people that they're using the law to go after people who are not, who are simply there with ideas that they find detestable. In Los Angeles, the government has lost all 5 of such cases that the trial reached, or that reached trial. 5 straight acquittals. None of this is slowing down the White House, however. The Trump administration delivers another crushing blow to Antifa and terrorist network, they write. The White House announced with Minnesotan arrests. The release details federal cases where Antifa individuals in states including Minnesota, Oregon, Texas, Washington, New Jersey, California, and Indiana, all across the country. Now, here's a list of these. Now, I want to go through the one specific case we talked about. Now, there's plenty that we can go through, most of which we covered in other parts of the conversation. And you should remember, these things are literally flimsy from the get-go. This is, I really do argue that this is these will either get dropped or to a lesser amount or overturned entirely, other than probably the guy who shot somebody. But that's my opinion. But I do see a world in which this goes dangerously in the direction where the entire system circles the wagons, and none of them are on our side. June 23, Texas anti-ICE protesters convicted of terrorism charges sentenced to at least 50 years in prison. I just think that's one of the craziest things I've had to. This is absolutely insane. Like people have pointed out, what Maxine Waters, I forget the amount, or, look at these people that have gone to prison. Like, look at the people that are like the person Trump was associated with who just got out after 6 months after sexually abusing a child. These are people that were at a protest. That's about it. Not the guy that shot, but the people that were there on top of that. 50 years? I mean, guys, they haven't even arrested anybody with the Epstein conversation. They haven't even gone after any of the people they said they would. And this makes sense? After a 3-week jury trial, the 9 activists were all found guilty with a slew of criminal charges in March, stemming from a 4th of July protest at an immigration detention facility in Texas. The demonstrators arrived late at night with a plan to set off fireworks as part of the noise demonstration to show solidarity with those detained inside. A few of those protesters spontaneously broke off from the main group and vandalized cars in the parking lot. There's a crime. Charge them with a crime. A guard shack slashed the tires on a government van and broke a security camera. When a police officer arrived on the scene, he drew his weapon. One of the activists fired an AR-15, hitting the officer in the shoulder. So I've heard reports that it was like neck to shoulder, so pretty close, I think, in the neck shoulder area. The officer survived. So right there, what you have is one guy who decided of his own accord. By the way, you'll get into this, whether the guns they have at home or elsewhere, they're legally owned. But get into this, the guy decided to act. And I argued, no matter the context, because of what he knew he was doing, that was a crime. Either way, whatever your opinion, that would be the person that would be justifiably, in most people's minds, the person you could charge with a crime. The point of this is all the other people that were there. He was sentenced, but even this, though, alone, 100 years in prison. 100 years. Maxwell didn't get, there are people that have committed multiple murders that don't get 100 years. How do you make sense of that, guys? I find that to be outrageous. It's just an abuse of the system. They're trying to make a statement, and it's not justified, even if he did everything you said. Song was convicted of attempted murder. Oh, and I'll add to it, guys. The reason that it's 100 years in the minds of the system and Trump's team is because not just the shot. It wasn't just the shot. It was that they did it with this intent. Same thing the left is doing, right? Or the right at this moment. You did it because you hate Jewish people, so that's so much worse. Well, ultimately, whether you do it because you hate this group or that group, why would it be any worse? You still committed the same crime because they decide to put that lens on it. So then eventually you can just only have the lens. You don't even need the crime. You could say, well, we know if you think that, it leads to that. That's what they do. And so in this case, same situation, that they say he deserves 100 years because he didn't just shoot a police officer. He conspired to plan a domestic terrorist act with a cell of terrorists to take over. That's what they do. Song was convicted of attempted murder for an officer of the United States, as well as a firearm and explosives charge. He was also convicted of a riot. Providing material support to terrorists. Providing material support to terrorists. See my point? That's what adds to that. So who has verified that they're even terrorists by any metric, any definition, other than Trump saying Antifa is a group like that, and then we declare them as Antifa that is part of this organized group that are terrorists, not just that they say they're anti-fascist. It's a complete bastardization of all this stuff, guys, and they know what they're doing. And it says he faced anywhere from 20 years to life in prison. Zachary Evans, Autumn Hill, Savannah Batten, Elizabeth Soto, and Megan Morris were sentenced to 50 years in prison. Marcella Ruda, another demonstrator, was sentenced to 70 years in prison. All 6 were convicted of riot, providing material support to terrorists, and explosive charges. This is why this has to be overturned. This is such a stretch. It's painful. I don't understand how the judge or anybody could not be people should be, this person, somebody's to recognize that this was a political act. That's what I believe. And at the end of the day, in the sense of what the system is doing, the same thing they talk about political judges. Well, here you go. It happens on all sides. That's always the point. So outside of the terrorism side of this, or the idea of using the explosive charge, so this guy does stuff and then they're responsible for it. So they rioted, or even then they just were at a protest that you called a riot. And this is how 70 years? I mean, even add that on. Rioting, explosive charges, even material support to a terrorist, 70 years is insane. Evitz, Hill, Morris, and Ruda were acquitted on attempted murder and firearms charges. Rightly so, you see, because there's literally no connection to this stuff. But then it says, I would have expected lengthy sentences here, more in a ballpark of 50 to 25, but 50 to 100 years? It's obscene. It doesn't make any sense. The Trump administration praised the sentences, of course. He's, quote, the sentences handed down today make clear that Antifa terrorists who attack law enforcement and federal facilities will face swift and uncompromising justice, Todd Blanche said. Yeah, the same Todd Blanche that's ignoring the Epstein files. But realize that, the Antifa terrorists who attacked law enforcement. Oh, I had a point there. I just lost. I'll keep going. It says Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, said in a statement, their violent extremism has no place in our country. And the department, that's what it was. Look at all the examples of this administration calling people terrorists who were later proven to not be a terrorist, like Garcia, like Khalil, like Ozturk, like tons of people that they tried to go put to jail for being a domestic terrorist who ultimately were caught lying, saying they were shot at, saying they were hit when they were not. And yet we're supposed to believe that we should at the very least go, maybe they're lying about this too. Continue to aggressively investigate, disrupt, and prosecute those who threaten law enforcement officers. They didn't seem to do that, though. In a statement, Song said he had fired at a police officer because and this is what the guy who fired said, because the police officer had his weapon drawn. And Song believed he was about to shoot a protester. Now, that doesn't give him the right to shoot the police officer, but at the same time, he's arguing that it wasn't some irrational act to hurt anybody. It was that he saw, and remember where we are right now, guys. There's examples of people being shot with the ICE overlap, and this goes back a long way before we even got here, there was already a huge growing conversation about police and shooting individuals that weren't justified. So now you're at a point where it's at the peak of this conversation, and they're ready to fight. And this became a conversation when it became like, what if they're doing this illegally, right? Or do you have a right to defend yourself? And so the answer is yes, by the way, despite how uncomfortable and contentious that gets. If, for example, some cop kicks in your door without identifying themselves and you open fire, courts around the country have roundly held that you have a right to defend yourself because you don't know that's a cop. So the same thing applies in the context of you're engaging with something illegal. Now, I'm not justifying or advocating for any of that. I don't believe in the violence in any sense other than defending yourself and your family, but maybe you could argue that applies. The point becomes, in his mind, he's arguing he thought that person was going to get shot unjustly. I still argue it was a wrong move, but he says Gross admitted during the trial his weapon was pointed at the back of a person who was fleeing the parking lot. And it says, quote, I never want to see good people standing for what they believe in, gunned down in the street. Now, he could also just be making this up to make himself sound more, whatever you would call it. But it says now 21 people have been arrested, have been arrested, have been persecuted, have been punished. For knowing me or being my friend, this is wrong. This is mass punishment, mass collective punishment. This is guilt by association. This is injustice. It says, even though many of the protesters did not know each other, which I just find insane, or were loosely affiliated through some kind of protest group. We have those right now, guys. So we go to a protest and suddenly somebody does something. Right now, the standing of this is that you could all be charged for terrorism because you're there. Prosecutors said the attack on the officer was premeditated and part of a conspiracy. They also said the activists were part of the North Texas Antifa cell, which was seen as part of the administration's effort to criminalize Antifa, which is not an organization, but rather a constellation of left-wing views, as they frame it. Now, I agree. I mean, like I said, it's obvious that most of these people they just feel they're standing up against what they're dealing with, and they identify with what they think that is. Not that they're signed of some terrorist organization. But at the same time, let's not forget that it is used. Agent provocateur types, or going in with these groups like a Patriot Front, the same thing in a different sense, to break windows and cause violence so the police can then use that to stop what you're doing, to stop peaceful protesters that are uncomfortable. But it says during the trial, prosecutors displayed group messages from some of the defendants in which they planned the protest, right? And discussed bringing firearms and dressing in all black to prevent themselves from being easily identified. Okay, so that right there to some people is enough. It shouldn't be, because the reality is you can plan a protest And let's be clear, though, maybe this turns out that this is all lie, and they did everything they said. The point would be that they would need that evidence, not just the insinuation. And we should demand that, even if they're right, because allowing this circumvention, it will be used against you. My point, though, is that so you plan a protest, right? You discuss bringing firearms, which, by the way, at least in some place in this country, you have that legal right. And what's funny to me is you have the Republicans who would usually be fighting for that no matter what, who are going, they're terrorists because of that. How ridiculous. But then dressing in all black. Okay, so too do tons of people in this conversation. I've even shown you examples of Republicans dressing up in all black to blame this stuff on Antifa and vice versa. The left and the right, and that's all in my mind the same game, trying to blame all of us so the government can use that. But just realize that all that becomes a problem only when you make it that's what they plan to do. And it does not seem that was the plan, other than one guy ultimately firing on a cop. And then that some retroactive thing gets placed over all of it, that they all plan to do that. It's a stretch, man. And it says, but some of the defendants, like Batten, Elizabeth Soto, and her husband, Enos Soto, were not involved in the planning, even of the event itself, arrived separately at the protest, and left when the guards at the facility asked them to do so. So now you have an example of people who left when they were asked to leave, and then somehow now they're still culpable for something that you get it. Nobody who's honest should be supporting this, even if you think they're criminals. It should be done the right way if you think they're criminals. Because that's what I keep saying, is that this only then will lead to them getting let off if you think they're actually criminals. It says Morris stayed in a van. Many of the protesters had carpooled in with a cache of weapons and body armor while the protest was ongoing. Now that is, out of all the things, the idea that you have that, and first of all, we should make sure that is what it sounds like, and wasn't just some kind of, hockey armor and a gun they brought. I'm just hypothetically, I don't know. A cache of weapons and body armor can sound like a lot, or it could be something they frame it as that when it's some kind of, nuanced part of the same conversation. But even that, though, is not a crime, guys. And if we stand by the reality of that, it doesn't matter whether or not they bring everything you think, if they used it or not matters. And at the end of the day, it's one group. Not all of them. It was just the ones that went in that car. Not everyone that was there. They got charged for 70, 50 years. And it says Morris stayed in the van, or that she later fled from police when they arrived on scene. Now, you could argue that means that potentially guilty, but let's not forget where this was happening, right? People are very afraid of what this devolves into around this very kind of conversation, specifically around ICE. She was ultimately arrested after the traffic stop that night. Prosecutors in the case charged and secured convictions of 8 of the 9 defendants for providing material support for terrorists. That's the connection. The 9th defendant, Daniel Sanchez Estrada, wasn't even at the protest, but was convicted of corruptly concealing a document of record after prosecutors said he moved left-wing zines, like little, some people call them both. It's like little books, little printed books of information about their socialist ideals or what they want to do or how they want to overthrow the government. Guys, none of that's a crime, by the way. The idea of, let's if we don't really understand by this point that it's written in our Constitution that you have a right to change and overthrow this government, should you feel they're not acting what's the actual phrase? I'm just blanking all of a sudden. Basically, that they act, that it does what it's supposed to do. That we know that it's acting for the interest of the country and us. It's right. It's very clearly documented that we have a right to alter or abolish it. That's not to say that they would even allow that, or it's something you should bandy about. But at the end of the day, the point is that you could talk about those things and write things down about why we should find some new direction. That's what this country is supposed to be about. Freedom of thought, ideology, but see, they're so insecure and aware that people are seeing what they are, that they're trying to crack down on people who have any ideas outside of what they allow. That's supposed to be the free speech party. It's the same, left and right, same thing. Wasn't even at the protest. And so apparently, whatever this means, because this is still being, the idea that he moved signs, look, maybe she wanted to hide those because they were what they were framing as terrorism. Maybe within those books, they were saying, but this, look, whatever it comes down to, it was printed material. It was speech. It's exactly what we're talking about. It's books. The idea that became a crime because of the argument that they were going to plan something they didn't is all part of this scam. And even then, he wasn't even present. And again, his name was Daniel Sanchez Estrada. Oh, where was that? I thought it was on there. Am I missing it? I guess she didn't write it on there. Anyway, it was at least 50 years. They all got 50, 70, 100. The only one got 100, but there was like 50 and 70 for the rest of them. Oh, it's right there. Oh, so that was right. That's why I said that earlier. It was the one, he got 30 years. That's why they didn't list it. Continuing really quickly to finish the paragraph, and you'll see that makes sense for the podcast. He was convicted, even though he wasn't the protest, of corruptly concealing a document or record, just these printed materials they've had well before this about their ideology, moved left-wing signs and other materials at the request of his wife after she was arrested. Sanchez Estrada was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 30 years for moving printed documents. Rather, not even documents, like little booklets with information. I just don't know how anybody can be okay with that, guys. It's the same as you arguing that you can go to a trucker convoy protest and your wife at home could try to hide some MAGA flags because you thought the cops would think that meant you were a terrorist. And then they're criminals because they did. It's the same idea. It is not a crime to have ideas. At least it's not supposed to be. Now it says prosecutors in the case. Oh, right there. It says, quote, "I worked really hard every day in this country," he says, "and I believe in human rights and helping others in need. I donate money and I help I donate money and art to help animals and other people." He says, "I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a teacher. I'm not a terrorist." He said this in court in his sentencing. This is him right here. Now, who's to say, you could argue he's lying about all that. But it starts to become insanely clear that these people are not at all what they're making them out to be. Just like neither was Garcia, neither was Ozturk, neither was Khalil. It's what they do. They have a very clear track record here, guys, the government. Continuing. Although the charge does not require prosecutors to prove a connection, which is insane, to any kind of terrorist ideology, only that a defendant provided support for one of the list of several crimes. The Justice Department spun the convictions as proof that Antifa was a terrorist organization. The defendants in the case are a collection of activists who were loosely affiliated with one another through a local left-wing book club and gun club, neither of which are a crime. During the trial, prosecutors highlighted many of the signs that the book club reads as evidence of the conspiracy and ideology that linked the demonstrators. I mean, think about how insane that is. You're saying because they have left-wing beliefs that therefore that proves that what they did was terrorism. That is what this Trump team actually thinks, I think. We're seeing them scream this every day. Steve Miller and all of them. These are because the left-wing monster terror. I thought this was the Unity Party. I thought they were telling us they were bringing these parties together in the beginning. Nothing. I mean, I don't even think when they say their name, they're telling the truth. Guys, these people are ridiculous. Left and right. The idea is that they're showing you clearly they're abusing everything we hold sacred. The evidence was met with widespread criticism from legal observers who said that it amounted to criminalizing freedom of speech. What it is. Prosecutors also focused heavily on the cache of guns that many of the defendants owned and some brought to the detention center on July 4th. It is undisputed that all of the firearms were bought legally and that there was only one person who fired a weapon on that day. Prosecutors also highlighted other evidence that they claimed proved that the protesters planned violence, including their decision to communicate with auto-delete messages and Signal. I mean, are we kidding? Everybody used this stuff today, guys. Everybody. You know why? Because of what we just went through. Because they're spying on you and they're collecting your data and that's obvious. But now the very idea of using a VPN, for example, becomes the proof that you're a terrorist. We all see where this is going. An encrypted messaging Signal, basically. We all know the encrypted messaging. Widely used among activists, journalists, and other citizens wary of government surveillance. Exactly. But that's apparently enough. Earlier this month, prosecutors filed criminal conspiracy charges against 15 activists in Minneapolis who allegedly interfered with immigration ICE agents performing their duties. A federal jury in Spokane, Washington, found 3 prosecutors guilty of conspiracy for participating in a 2025 protest. So they're turning in the very act. I mean, look, I should even play this again. Because the reality is Trump has been clear about most of this stuff if you actually listen to him. Where was that? Here we go. Like the Second Amendment, like any of this stuff. Take the guns, due process second. You're a child if you're not honest about what that is. And the same thing here. He said this about his special day. This was like last year, but it was whatever event he was planning. And it wasn't that if it's violent. It was undeniable. If you come out and protest, we will shut it down. You can't hide from this stuff, guys.
Big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest.
It goes on. I mean, you can deny that if you want, but you're a liar. The obvious reality was you protest, we're going to come at you with force. That should have been enough right there, along with everything else that's happening today. And now that's what we're dealing with right now. And they did. And so those people are getting charged with crimes and judges are upholding it. Who knows why? Because they protested. Here is a list of the years, 100 years, 70 years, 50 years. And rightly so, as this person writes that. Meanwhile, the ICE agents who murdered Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and Keith Porter, 0. As far as I can tell, all of them are still working in different locations. Let that sink in. White House proudly comes out with this and says, Antifa terrorists who practice violent terrorism. Violent extremist terrorism. like terrorism doesn't get it done. These guys are such clowns. It's about the idea of hyperbolic, it's hyperbolic. What's the word? Hyperbolicizing? How do you say that? Turning it into hyperbolic rhetoric. I mean, that's what they do. Left and right. They're just bad at this these days, it seems. Remember, we're talking about a bunch of people who showed up at a protest, one of which wasn't even there. Violent extremist terrorism? Yeah, and that's demonstrated by one guy popping off one shot that doesn't kill the guy. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay that. What I'm saying is violent extremist terrorism would be trying to kill everybody at the building. We're trying to go and bomb them, shooting everybody, showing up with... That's so... Think about what we're always talking about overseas. It's insulting your intelligence, guys. And it says, by attacking law enforcement and federal facilities will be prosecuted the full extent of the law. Combined 450 years in prison. Now ask yourself, look at all the people Trump has pardoned, Juan Orlando Hernandez, and all these like actual terrorists, by the way, or actual drug dealers, or actual criminals, or fraudsters. But yeah, go after your political opponents, because that's not secret at all. Well, here's a specific example, and I can't prove this. I tried to verify it, but I do agree with the logic behind it. What people were reporting this from the local area as if they found her using flock cameras. But as the reporting goes, it seems like they might have contacted her beforehand. But ultimately what happened here is federal agents tracked down the woman in Syracuse and even go into the polling station while she was working there, which is a secondary story, but it matters. That's not supposed to be allowed to happen. But here's how this goes. 2 U.S. immigration ICE agents issued a warning to a Syracuse woman Tuesday, and this was posted updated June 26th, posted June 24th, to remove a social media post, or rather a media account, they said threatens federal agents. It's funny how Elon Musk didn't scream about this one, did he? He didn't gripe about how they were trying to censor them for ideas, because he's a ridiculous hypocrite. Now, look, this is not about threatening anything, guys. We'll get to it very clearly. We already talked about this this has to do with the person who was involved in the shooting and is hiding his identity, which is a crime. So by pointing out what his name is not a crime. There's no way that's a crime. So what they had to do is pretend that they gave more information than they did. Like they lied about the shovels, like they lied about the beat, like they lied about everything. The woman that they said pulled a gun, they shot her 7 times and almost killed her. And the guy said, 5 shots, 4 holes, or whatever he said. And it turned out later that she didn't have a gun. It was not even on her, and they shot at her for no reason. It all came out, but guess what happened? Nothing. So continuing. It says, Paige Goina said she believes they are referring to a January post where she named an ICE agent who shot Renee Good. The agents handed her a form letter that says they were investigating threats made by against ICE personnel. The form says agents had identified an Instagram account they believe breaks federal law. See, in my mind, guys, the idea that anything that you could say out loud or put on text in any way breaks law is insane to me. That's free speech. But of course, as I always point out, the world today, people say fire in a theater. So, if you want to argue that, then you argue you believe in limited speech. And you may agree with that. If you think saying the president should, threatening somebody like that, but in verb saying, I hope that happens to them is now a crime, well, then you believe in limited speech. And maybe that's what everybody should believe in your mind. Have the conversation. The reality, though, is free speech is absolute. And it means you can say whatever you want. The action is the crime. I know how crazy that is, right? And so here we are. We're Posting this thing is enough to get her charged with a crime, or at least they say we might. And it says they asked her to remove and discontinue the behavior. How Orwellian is that, guys? According to the unsigned document she shared with Instagram, it says the agent had New Jersey phone numbers and license plates. She said the agents held a folder with copies of her social media posts. This is not just happening in the UK, guys. It's happening all over this country. It's just people like Musk and the rest aren't really highlighting it while they scream about what's happening in the UK. They tried to scare me into signing it while I was working, she says, at the polling place. It says, Gonia posts frequently about immigration on her social media accounts. In January, she posted the name of Jonathan Ross. Now, we already saw this conversation. They all clutch their pearls and scream doxing when he's legally required to identify himself. Ross, which was his name, is an ICE agent who, by the way, has already been reassigned, as far as I know, to, last time I checked, to another location, despite him being involved with the killing of an innocent person who shot Renee Good in Minnesota. And remember what they did? They called her derogatory names afterward. It's all on video, it's all on audio recordings. His name has been widely reported in news stories and other social media across the world. And it says, I think today is a great day for Jonathan to be indicted, she says. Oh, how dare she threaten him with justification, right? How dare she threaten him with rather accountability, I should say. How dare you threaten us with, exposing our crimes? Gonia said she does not consider it doxing to quote a news story and call for an indictment, because it's not, guys. I didn't dox his personal information, such as address, phone number. See, the reality is this is what Miller and the rest were trying to do. Act like simply pointing out who a police officer is, which is their legal obligation, is doxing. And they got enough dumb people to fall for that. It says, Gonia said she does not intend to delete her post. Good for her. Quote, for ICE to come to me over a social media post feels very 1984. She's right. Now, this will make it even more obvious. Here's what the Homeland Security account posted. Now, just so it's clear, please read into it for yourself. The only thing that they shared was the name of the police officer. So here is what NPR posts. She posted about ICE. 5 months later, the HS agents told her to take down her post. It's exactly what happened. Now, I can show you probably 4 right off the top of my head of examples of Homeland Security or State Department posting things on Twitter that are flagrantly false, including like the snow shovel discussion or the automatic machine gun they claim that lady had when they shot her 7 times, and she did not. They all stood by that. Bondi and the rest, McLaughlin, they just screamed over the top and said, we know it's facts. We can prove them. They're monsters and terrorists and rapists. And then it got proved to be false. So just make it clear that it's not shocking for this account, even though it should be, to share outright false things and knowingly do so. Disgusting headline, NPR, is what they said. The individual didn't just post about ICE. She committed a federal crime by posting the address of the law. She did not. I mean, literally did not. Doxing federal agents, I mean, they did this because they have to try to convince you that they didn't just try to go after her for free speech. And then, you can read all this down here. ICE agents stalked U.S. citizen at polling place, pressure to delete her post from January. And it says the exact post read, the ICE agent, I mean, we just went through it. I mean, this is all very easily documented. And it just kills me that they continue to push these things. Oops. How'd I just do that? That was weird. Anyway, how's it keep doing that? I thought I had one thing going back on it, I guess, but I guess not. Either way, the point simply was you can read through this entire story. I thought I had a thing not backspace, but whatever it is, backload. I thought I had one more sheet to show. But what we're talking about is the idea that they frame it as the address when you can look through the documentation. You can look through what they're saying, even in the what follows. And ultimately, you can clearly see that they're saying, where is the address? Show me where that is in the post. It's not there. And they're highlighting that same thing. And so they come out and try to highlight this or, gaslight this to get you to think that she did. And that's what we got through all of these stories. Enough people who screamed the government narrative because they were part of that team. Says our law enforcement officers are on the front lines arresting terrorists, gang members. Hardly. A fraction of what they're actually doing, if at all. 8,000 increase in death threats. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't murder innocent people or name death threats as people simply saying you're a criminal, because they are. And of course, 1,300% increase of assaults. We've already gone over this. Most of these are people protesting. Or it's the same thing. Look, you can't stop seeing the parallels between how they propagandize here and how Israel does the same thing to Palestinians. right? Or ADL does to us here around the same conversation. Suddenly, Free Palestine is the biggest threat in the world. Now, finishing with Iran, which I think it's important to highlight so you guys understand that is still happening. But for those that have not been following along, I think this will do a good kind of quick breakdown of how absurd this is and where it currently is. Now, I said this in the beginning, but what happened so far over the last couple of hours, something might have changed. And maybe I'll even play one of these clips and try to check really quickly. But my point is, as it stands right now, this should be pretty up to date. But I want to start with this clip from Ryan Raspiani about just showing you the absurdity of this. And I don't even know what you would call this. Is it schizophrenia? Or is he schizophrenic? It's schizophrenia. That's what it is. Yeah. Or, kind of joking, but is it that, or is he being manipulated by somebody? Is he not? Is he? Is it two different Trumps? I mean, I don't know. Because at the end of the day, this is embarrassing. And I would argue, if the simplest explanation, it starts with him saying they're terrorists because he wanted you to think that to push his agenda. Now he recognizes he has to start walking away from this because he's failed, he lost, and so he tries to turn the narrative. But of course, then the day later he goes, "We're going to kill you all," because they bomb or because they we'll get into it. Fire on a ship that was illegally trying to cross the strait. And at the end of the day, no matter how you look at what was right or wrong of it, they had signed an agreement, nothing bound. A memorandum is not, it's not a ceasefire, but they signed it. And from day one, they didn't move Lebanon. They were threatening them, all of which are violations. I'll show you in a second. And then somebody tries to go through the strait away from the path that they agreed on in the memorandum. Or at the very least, that Iran would be the one dictating that system, at least in the interim. And then so they fired on him. And so this kicks off the entire conversation where now they violated something. So at the end of the day, this statement here, it just shows you that it's all about whatever he wants to say in the moment.
They really are a nation of terror and hate, and they're paying a big price right now. The lovely country of Iran, it's a beautiful place. Would anybody like to go there? The Islamic Republic of Iran. But
now you could argue he's being sarcastic, but you can go through the entire, ongoing back and forth of his statements, and it's just hypocritical, right? I mean, he's done exactly sentiments like that, where they love me, or end of the day, you start with one thing which is that we can't let them have any of these things. They're all bad. We have to stop them from destroying the world. All of that is turned. Already made statements about why it's okay for them to have missiles. Which it is. Already made statements for why it's okay for them to have a civilian nuclear program. It is. That's legal. But that's the diametric opposite of what he's promising right before this. So it's already clear that he's trying to pull away from this. But he can't let himself look weak. And so that's why he responds with rhetoric. But before we get into all of it quickly, make sure you see, and I might have pointed to this briefly in the last show, but the Senate votes to block the War Powers Resolution that had already passed. I think it was like 48 to 50, and then it flips to 50-48. So two people just switch sides, and boom, just like that, they stopped it. Like I said in the show, I don't think it was ever designed to be real. It was about making you think that people cared, and some of them were stopping the bad thing, but none of them truly, I think none of them are actually against most of this, guys. U.S. strikes Iran over Strait of Hormuz. Looks like this is happening now. Maybe. We'll come back to that in a second. We'll look at it. So, June 25th. Some of these I might have briefly said, but just to go through it again quickly. Israel and Lebanon deny the U.S. claim that Israel's withdrawn from southern Lebanon. How you guys, if you're ever anybody out there who's still going along with whatever Trump said that day, you got to laugh at him. I mean, having somebody be that consistently incorrect and still taking him at face value, it's got to be some kind of sickness. So here, Israel, Lebanon deny it. Because what was happening? Trump was claiming they made an agreement and they're going to leave Lebanon because he wanted the world to think that he was winning. I don't know why he thinks that's going to go anywhere. At least that's what I read it as. And then Israel stood up and said, that's not true. Like every other conversation. It's also important to recognize, and this is where the behind the scenes part comes in, that Israeli media was making the statement on June 25th that according to Israeli officials, Benjamin Netanyahu succeeded in convincing Donald Trump to allow them to go after Lebanon, to not proceed with the withdrawal that they said they were going to do. So basically, you can argue that they maybe thought that was going to happen, but then Netanyahu called Trump and said, no. Even though you signed the document, even though that's going to make you look stupid, we're not going to do that. So now you have to go out there and sell that. Good luck. However you want to read it, guys, because he did. He went out and still tried to sell the idea, knowing that they were still bombing Lebanon while he said they were leaving Lebanon. That's how ridiculous it gets. But it's important to realize, whether true or not, that Israel's telling the world that Trump gave them the go-ahead to violate the agreement. On top of that, on the 24th, Trump is considering, according to this propagandist, asking Syria to fight Hezbollah in Lebanon. And of course, for those paying attention, this is not that new when you understand that this was already what happened from Lebanon to Syria and different locations. They're shuffling people around as this kind of carve out terrorist organization group, whatever you want to call this, like CIA, Mossad, ISIS, you know, whatever this stuff has become. If you don't know by now, the idea that Al-Qaeda, ISIS is a construct that's been created, doesn't mean they control every element of it, but it is something that we can prove from day one was created, or I shouldn't say day one, but ultimately was created and molded into a used kind of propaganda tool through intelligence. You can prove that they've been arming and funding and moving them around. It's that we even have to walk away from that and not be, it's like discussing any number of these things, knowing 9/11 or understanding Charlie Kirk. Like, it's insane how clear these things become. So the reality is, we know that what they're doing here is working with terrorism while pretending to fight terrorism. And so what's crazy is, on top of that, he then says, let's get Syria to go fight Hezbollah. You mean this guy? As you all know, this is the actual post, by the way, on the archive of the State Department, or this was damn it, stupid thing. Sometimes you can get this thing to work just by going back and forth. For the podcast, I'm on the archive. Sometimes if you just kind of go back and forth, there it goes. Perfect. Oh, wait, what? Oh, tell me I didn't include the wrong archive. Son of a gun. Unless that's something weird. What? How'd that just happen? Did you see that? Am I losing my mind? I hope you guys just caught that live. I copied this. This is what I'm talking about. There's weird stuff going on this platform. And then I came over here to post it, and I don't have an archive of this out anywhere. And it came up with this Politico article. That is weird. You guys all saw that. Whatever. I'm going to move on. I'm telling you, you guys, I've just literally copied it from right there. How did that, who knows? Anyway, here's the actual post. No, it's weird. From Rewards for Justice. And this is also the one that you can see, where was that? Anyway, there's multiple examples of it. This one from the State Department. This one's from the other U.S. government department for giving these rewards. Muhammad al-Jawlani, $10 million reward. You guys have seen this before. That's the guy running Syria right now. And while he took over Syria, they still had this out. There was an overlap where they took this down after he had been in power in Syria. You got to recognize how insanely insulting that is, how stupid that is. They were never really fighting terrorism, guys, and you have to understand that, at least not in the way they were framing it as. But yeah, let's get our terrorist bodies to go over there and go attack people the freedom fighters that were actually fighting for freedom. Typical. So Ben Joseph points this out from the 27th. Just the last 48 hours from, so it'd be like, 27th and back. Iran hit ships using U.S.-backed corridor, which we'll get into. There's a little deviation here between, looks like Oman is sort of kind of playing it both ways, as we can see right now. So a ship tries to go through a corridor that's not agreed by Iran, and they deter it. They didn't sink the ship, as far as I could tell. Nobody was killed. U.S. attacked Iran after that. Iran responds in hitting U.S. bases. Iran hits a ship using U.S.-backed corridor, second time. Traffic is now moving to the Iran-designated corridor. That was on the 27th, but more happened since then. But so all we're highlighting here, guys, is the only thing happening is the other side, Israel, the United States, choosing to either not follow the agreements or get other people to do it for them. And of course, I fell for it again award. And you can see down here, his prediction is what ultimately happened. So, Drop Site News highlights the Iranian PSA or PGSA. Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority warned that vessels using navigation routes, and you guys will know this already because we've already reported it, going outside the designated framework will not be covered by its safe passage guarantees. And this is right now in this 60-day up in the air period, which might not be even happening anymore. The authority also said transits outside its approved routes would not be eligible for insurance coverage. So bottom line, the point is they're saying on the 25th, If you go around what we're discussing that we've outlined so far somewhat in the memorandum, then you're not going to be allowed to. That seems obvious, right? It's like saying if you bomb Lebanon, it's a violation of the agreement, which they're already doing anyway. So Ynet News puts this out. Iran's strike exposes, it's on the 26th, that's after there was a hit on the ship, Oman's double game in battle for alternative Strait of Hormuz route. So the simple point is that you have basically Oman is working with Iran to create their designated toll passageway. But then you also have Oman sort of working with the United States to create another passage, as I can read it right now. But as usual, some of this stuff may flesh out more as we go forward. But so what it seems like to me is that Oman is trying to, not get attacked by, get the U.S. to continue to support them or not attack them, as well as work with Iran to benefit from whatever they do. But so what happened? I can't tell whether Iran is outwardly angry at Oman. That would make sense to me. But what we can see is that they've called out that action. And they've said whatever they're doing is unjustified and they can't go that route. That's clear. So on the 25th, this was the second one, I believe. Or actually, no, the first one. Anyway, the case is simply the same. There's two examples of this. A vessel near the Strait of Hormuz was struck following their warning. So again, as you can hear, they warn them and say, you're going the wrong direction. You go that way, we can't allow it. And they do anyway. So to frame this as terrorism or random attacks, which is what they're doing, is just weak. It's desperate because it's obvious it wasn't that case. It was obvious the ship was circumventing what Iran at least believed was the agreed upon location. So they warn them and say, you can't go that route. So who do you think is driving them to do that? I mean, ask yourself genuinely, because aren't we? There's mines everywhere, which aren't actually the case. We've proven that. I would argue. I think the evidence is very clear. On top of that, though, everyone's aware of this dynamic and that Iran is supposed to have this control. So why would the ship force its way through? Because I guarantee, in my opinion, that the U.S. is making that happen, which is ultimately what you can see. A route was reportedly opened without the coordination of Iran, causing a collision, and it's just exactly what you'd expect. So whatever you believe or agree is the right, that whether it should be happening, it is what Donald Trump signed. And they did it anyway. Now, after that, Trump says Iran violated the ceasefire, which, by the way, I guess you could arguably call it a ceasefire, but not in a legal sense because they didn't sign that. But the memorandum in the discussion was supposed to be ceasing fire for the period while they've worked this out. But so what we're talking about is Trump claiming they violated the memorandum when they've never once upheld it. Because, as we've shown you, number one was Lebanon. And Trump said he agreed with that. He signed it. And it said very clearly, Israel removes itself from Lebanon, the fighting stops in Lebanon on all fronts, is what it actually said. Which, by the way, would include Gaza as far as I can tell, but maybe not. We'll see. So how would they violate it? This is Trump trying to shift the narrative, and make it about them breaking the rules. Nobody believes this, guys. Again, the majority, in my opinion. Ryan Rosbiani, U.S. violated the Iran memorandum again. Clause number 5, putting Iran in charge of the Hormuz, then bombed it for enforcing it. And we've gone over the 14 points. We've gone over 10 to 14 since April. It's the same points. And like Trump signed, they have the right to begin to create this enforcement. Now, there's not supposed to be any tolls. And it does appear that there are some level of that happening. And you could argue that's a violation. But what's interesting, that's not what Trump's not yelling about that. Because in my mind, it is the inevitable, and they know that. But even that is still there's a lot that's hard to verify right now. But I've heard the argument, because I had said earlier, I didn't seem to think that there was any tolls happening just yet. But it does appear like the reporting suggesting there are some. But it doesn't seem that it's being universally applied to everybody. So it could just be people working with them. It's hard to say. But either way, the point is, it is the memorandum that they have the right to create this setup. And so they then try to enforce it, and Trump attacks them for it. I honestly kind of think it was manufactured. They wanted them to do this so they could turn around and blame them. At least Israel did. And that's why they tried to force it through. It kind of makes sense. Buried in the memorandum, Washington inked days ago, Article 5, Iran administers safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. That's what it is. And actually, going back to that, for the exact terminology so you can see it. Where was it? Right here. Yeah, so basically it's saying same thing on the 25th, that they're warned that vessels navigating through these routes will not be covered by safe passage guarantees. That's the exact quote. And the reason they're quoting that, because of the memorandum, right? So in article number 5 of the memorandum, Iran administers safe passage through the strait. Clearing mines, which remember I pointed to that, that's just what they included in the verbiage. You could argue they're in there, but nobody has ever found one, and there's past people going through. I mean, come on, guys, we know that's not the case. And military obstacles in water it controls. 460 toll-free days. Now, again, you could argue that's part of that, but I'm not seeing Trump or any of them make a big argument about how the tolls are violating everything. It ultimately comes down to the attack of the ship. Policing that corridor is not a violation. It is the job of the agreement hands to Iran. So when an unauthorized vessel ran the strait and Iran's Navy stopped it, Iran was executing Article 5 to the letter. The U.S. answer was airstrikes. Right? I mean, it feels manufactured. Iran did exactly what the deal authorized and got bombed for it. The aggressor here is the one who broke the signed agreement. I agree. He also writes, Trump confirms attacks on Iran, and this is the 27th, the next day, where he comes out again. This in and of itself is a violation of the agreement. But you remember, he was doing this before the 25th. So before he claims they violated ceasefire, he was already yelling, you better do this or we're going to bomb you again. And that was explicitly noted. You can't, the threatening back and forth was part of it. They all signed it. United States aircraft just struck Iranian missile and drone locations. Now this is the follow-up. So they bombed them after they try to stop a ship from illegally going through the strait. Then Iran attacks back. So let's be clear. There was never really any kind of pause. They were just expecting the U.S. to uphold its side. And the moment they didn't, they continued to, and they've been saying they were bombing Lebanon the whole time. So in their minds, they kind of already knew this was never really happening. But you had Trump pretending like it was always going on, like he's been doing for months. But what he said was, they did this, which, failing to point out that he attacked first. And it says, violating the ceasefire agreement. Again, lazy. And it's very possible they will never learn. There may come a point, he says, when we are no longer able to be reasonable. Here comes the threat again, the threat that he never seems to follow through with, and we'll be forced to militarily complete the job that we very successfully started. Wait, but I thought you were already done. I thought you were already defeated. You beat him already. Did you say that 17 times? But now you need to finish that? What a clown. How many times he traps himself with his own lazy arguments. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist. Yeah, another threat of genocide. You want to explain to me how Iran not existing could somehow not mean bombing and killing everybody? End of the day, it's a violation in and of itself. This threat is a violation of clause number 1 of the memorandum, and the attack is a violation of clause 5. Very easy document, guys. So on the 27th, Iran and the U.S. agree to halt attacks. Axios reports. You got to love that. And then you also got to laugh at how dumb Reuters is for just repeating what Axios says, even though Axios, which this article was, you guessed it, published by Barack Ravid, has been wrong consistently. I mean, almost every single time since they started doing this, because that seems to be the job. But guess what? It didn't happen. U.S. and Iran each announced retaliatory strikes in Iran, Kuwait, Bahrain. That was the 28th, 27th. This is posted on the 27th when we just saw them attacking. So my point was they tried to come up with this argument to get people to think that attacks had stopped. Why? Maybe financial manipulation? I don't even know. That seems like one of the likely possibilities, but they were lying yet again because they continued to exchange strikes right up until today and yesterday. So this is the today, 28th. U.S. and Iran are continuing to exchange strikes. This is as of today, and it stopped at about 5 this morning. U.S. and Iran trade attacks with few signs of de-escalation. It says, this one, still in the morning. Iran and the United States exchanged new strikes on Sunday, the 4th day of the flare-up of hostilities with no sign of a de-escalation that would get the ceasefire back on track. Wow. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps said the statement carried by the country's state media that it had targeted U.S. naval bases, Bahrain and Ali Al Salim Air Base in Kuwait in retaliation for American attacks, which were attacks based on the fact that they were pushing back on a ship. I want to be clear about this. As far as I can tell, the ship didn't sink. Nobody was killed. It was pushing them back with fire from where they were doing, which was a violation of the memorandum that Trump signed. And then you bomb multiple locations of Iran? Clearly, that's what Israel wanted, guys. And at the end of the day, then Israel responded. So there's an easy way to see how that started. The governments of Kuwait and Bahrain later said that they had come under attack. No casualties. Look at that. Of course, they could be lying because they want to hide that. The Israeli military said on Sunday that a soldier was killed in fighting in southern Lebanon. So same thing. Sunday beating today, guys, because they're still fighting in Lebanon, which is a violation of the memorandum. The Trump administration ceasefire with Iran was supposed to include an end to the fighting in Lebanon, but clashes there have continued. Israeli forces conducted strikes Sunday, today. So that's confounding. They didn't ever comply with that, but let's keep pretending like the ceasefire has been holding. How stupid. The governments of Kuwait and Bahrain said their countries were targeted by Iranian attacks earlier Sunday. The military said it intercepted several attacks. Kuwait's Ministry of Defense said the forces intercepted 2 ballistic missiles. But wait a minute. I thought they were spent out of everything, guys. I thought they didn't have any Navy or any ships or anything. Oh, I guess Trump lied about all of that. Surprise, surprise. Now let's see if this can update. Might not. I think it's still on a paywall, so I might not be able to see it. Oh, crap. It just went back on me. Well, anyway, let me know. We'll see if I'll quickly do an update after we kind of wrap here. We'll see how that one might be. Oh, there it is right there. I forgot we opened it. So last post here from Ryan on the 28th simply says, Iran says U.S. has no credibility on its commitments. After days after signing the memorandum and the war, the U.S. forces struck monitoring and surveillance sites along Iran's southern coast at the dawn, which I find relevant. Iran's foreign ministry said the strikes prove American regime holds the least value for its own commitments, and that breaking treaties is part of its nature. I've been saying that my entire time doing this, guys. There is nothing they hold sacred. They will violate every treaty and every agreement if it's in their interest. It's publicly documented. To Iran, a signature from the U.S. isn't worth the paper it's printed on. They put this out. The Iran Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement on the U.S. resuming violation of the war termination understanding at dawn. It says Iran strongly condemns the terrorist aerial attacks carried out by the U.S. military. Because remember, those were in response to Iran firing on a ship that was trying to cross through the strait in a way that wasn't allowed, according to the memorandum. And that was what Trump signed. So there's no way about this, guys. They let that happen. They either forced that or used it as an excuse to do something that was the first violation, at least save for the Lebanon example or the threats before that of the memorandum. And it says the savage attack, which constitute a flagrant violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the United Nations Charter, in addition to their memorandum, as well as the explicit breach of the first clause of their memorandum, demonstrate that the American regime holds the least regard or credibility for its own commitments. Oh, and then it says here, Iran, while reminding the UN Security Council and Secretary General of their responsibilities regarding the maintenance of international peace, affirms its determination to defend its national sovereignty and territorial integrity against the U.S. military aggression in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter. Such terrorists. It's insane. So, live updates. Last we checked here, U.S. and Iran agree to stop strikes, U.S. official says. I find that very hard to believe, guys. At the end of the day, this could be another point of saying we're going to meet on the weekend. I mean, it's Sunday, so it's past the weekend, but either way, right now, what it seems to me is that this will stop if the U.S. stops and complies with what they've agreed to. That's as simple as it gets. Israel's still going after Lebanon, so unless Iran decides to let the U.S. off the hook, that's not going to stop. This has gotten very simple at this point. And Iran only continues to benefit from the ongoing situation, despite what Trump keeps saying. So let's look at a couple of these last posts. It says, U.S. and Iran agree. Iran attacks Kuwait, Bahrain. Fail. Of course, you could already tell these didn't fail, by the way. There's already examples of them getting, and they're already lying about it, saying they didn't get through. It didn't attack them. Just small, you know? You can own those. You could say they got us, but we got more, but they have to pretend they didn't get through. Yeah, I guess we'll see. This says the talks planned despite the attacks, but from what I can see, Iran is kind of saying the opposite. Actually, we'll get to that in a second. Yep. So last it says Donald Trump announced major combat operations. Yeah, pretty much where we are, guys. So they're claiming that they're going to continue to talk, or the strikes are going to stop, but we'll see. I doubt that happens because of what Israel's doing. But here, the Kabisi letter says, breaking, the U.S. and Iran have agreed to stop the halts per Axios. So something tells me it's not real. And of course, somebody jokingly says, or this famous picture of the incorrect newspaper headline, the war is over. It wasn't. You know, it's a famous example of them jumping the gun. And it's the same idea, guys. They just keep jumping out with this. And I just don't believe it. And here Max Blumenthal highlights what this Hormuz letter said 13 hours ago. Iran state media says it has now no choice but to obtain the atomic bomb and remove the military option. As far as I could tell, it's not real. Max Blumenthal says that's fake. Even the Israeli-backed Iran International admitted there was no such story. The Hormuz letter, like I've been arguing, is some sort of, even the one, there's like a new one called like the Iranian letter. The Kabisi letter is the only one that we should question all of them that seems to have consistently been at least some, mostly correct. This one, I just don't trust these. It says the Iranian state media says it has now no choice to obtain a nuclear bomb. From as far as we can tell, that's not even an actual article. And it says this article did not represent the official position of the state-run media. Basically, it got made up. And even this is now saying the claim originates from a user-submitted post on Fars News. And they just run with that. Why? Because the agenda is to get you to think Iran's finally going for nukes. It's to help Trump's agenda. I'm convinced of that. Now, lastly, this is from today. Iran threatens complete halt to U.S. peace talks after tit-for-tat strikes. See, so you got Axios going, we did it, we're back, we're going to make agreements now, no more fighting. And Iran seems to be saying the opposite. Seems familiar, doesn't it? Iran warned Sunday, that is today, that it could bring ongoing peace talks with the United States to a complete halt after the fresh exchanges. So it's simple. It's basically the article is only a couple more paragraphs. The idea is that right now Iran is going, look, we might stop this entirely. But they've already threatened that, and they seem to continue to actually want peace. And the confounding part of that is, why would they keep thinking the U.S. government does? Who knows? Because they clearly do not. They clearly know that. But what's funny is in a backward way, it continues to almost prove to you that Iran really does. Because why would they keep engaging with this? I mean, the U.S. just bombed Iran again, guys. Do you realize how insane that is? That the U.S. government can directly bomb inside the country of Iran, and Iran has not once yet, thank God, and hopefully they never do, bombed the United States. They are at war with each other. I mean, how do we not see who the restraining one is? Who the one who has restraint? And that's not a good guy, bad guy thing. It's just I think it's what is in Iran's interest. And it really does show you that they're not who they framed them as, at the very least. So I guess we'll find out what happens next. Last point on this. Pretty weird. The U.S. is conducting the largest logistical operation in history, so Sprinter points out. This 30-second video shows the U.S. air logistical activity in West Asia over the past 7 days alone, accelerating by 20,000 times, so it's going really fast. It says, at the same time, such activity has been ongoing around the clock for 76 days. Think about that. The cost of the fuel, alone. It says, we are talking about the largest airlift in U.S. military history, if that's real. Because, GPS could be spoofed, which surpasses even the operation during the Iraq War in 2003 in its scale. Such a volume of cargo, if that's what's happening, again, anomalous, possible, such volume of cargo transfers far exceeds the usual replenishment of supplies. You see where this is going. All U.S. strategic warehouses in the region are almost fully loaded and continue to be brought to their maximum capacity. Now, I don't know if I believe that. I believe the reality seems to be more that they're completely drained. But either way, the point is, if this is the case, the suggestion is the U.S. Army is not spending billions of dollars, your tax dollars, on empty threats or demonstrative maneuvers. Demonstrative. All this indicates preparation for a preemptive, paralyzing strike and possibly the start of a ground operation. Now, this very well could be the kind of floated threat to get Iran to come to the table, to get them to think that this is what Trump is about to do, so maybe we should make a deal. Because no matter how it goes, even if Iran ultimately succeeds, a ground invasion will be catastrophic for everybody, including people in the globe, like around the world, because of what this causes and what it shuts down. So the real question is all of what's happening right now just a means to an end to get them to rebuild so they can actually do this at the expense of everybody? Sadly enough, I don't see that as a fringe possibility, which is why we need to speak up about this and why everybody from every country who cares about this needs to speak up and stop this from happening and recognize that Iran seems to be doing everything it can to actually bring this to an end. Even if you think it's to their benefit, guys, it's at the end of the day, we see where this is going. So it's this account is just as likely to be putting out something that might be supporting the team. I don't know. At the end of the day, and it could be misremembering this one versus the others. I forget. Anyway, the point is, it could be something put out in order to help Trump's agenda, but it could just be an insight on what they're doing behind the scenes. So as always, continue to question all of this stuff, guys, and, pay attention, because it's at the same time, that it's never been more clear. It's at the same time, some of things have never been more convoluted. So it's just important to be very skeptical and question what we're talking about, guys. Now, thank you for tuning in. I have a IMA panel that we'll be recording tomorrow. I don't know if it'll be coming out tomorrow, but ultimately I have only a few things happening over the next so many days. I have somebody coming to visit that we want to spend some time with. There's the pup. Since you guys know, for those that have been watching recently, she's been in here with me pretty often, and she knows the inflection of my voice. She knows when I'm starting to wrap up, and she doesn't usually get up this soon. But ultimately what happens is she starts to hear my outro, what I start to say, and she knows that. She also recognized the sound, and she knows. It's just funny. She's been around since we've been here in Tennessee. She's part of the TLAV team. But what I was saying, I will be probably only doing the IMA panel tomorrow, and then an interview potentially in a couple of days after that. It might be about a 3-day gap, but if I have time, I'll try to jump in here. But as always, guys, family first. It's always important, especially times like this, to make sure that that's our priorities are straight. Well, thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.